and you're all set to go.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting, March 24th, 2020. I call the meeting to order at 6:34. First order of business is public comment. If anyone in the audience would like to speak, please just raise your hand. You are certainly welcome. All right. I see no one. That being said, we'll move on to our first order of business, which is to interview / appoint Jennifer Donato to the Neary Building School Committee. Good evening, Jennifer. Welcome. I see you're here. Well, you're somewhat here. You are muted. There you are. Oh, except we don't hear you. Do you want to try and speak again just to make sure we can hear you, Jennifer? Okay, we'll give her a second to come back in. And Vanessa, will you keep an eye out for her? While we wait, I guess I'll just zip along and just do a chair's report quickly as we wait for her to come back. I just wanted to verify with the board that our April 19th meeting falls during school vacation week, that everyone is good with April 26th. I'm pretty sure we already talked about this, but I just wanted to verify. Okay, so that's good. We'll do the 26th. And just an update for the board that the pre-town meeting is April 18th at 6:30, and I will be going and representing the board and its articles. So just a heads up, no one has to go to that. She's not back yet, Vanessa?
Not yet. Oh, hang on.
She is. She is. Okay, let's bring her back over. All right, Jennifer, let's try this again. You are muted if you're there.
Yep. Okay. Sorry.
There you go. Wonderful. Welcome.
I'm
It's
sorry.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. It's always nice when we have new people step forward. And typically what we do here is we just want to welcome you. Thank you for stepping forward. Give you just a minute or two if you want to introduce yourself, why you have an interest in this committee. We'll kind of go roundtable with the board and we'll go from there. So again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. So my name is Jen Donato. I grew up in Southborough. I actually live in the home I grew up in, which is kind of weird and great. I've been through the Southborough public school system. I am an educator in Milford. I have been for 17 years now. I've worked in the middle school as a Spanish teacher for 15 years, and now I work with the K-2 population as an ELD teacher. I have two boys, a first grader and a 4-year-old. And honestly, I'm kind of looking for a way to get more involved in the community and just, learn more about the schools. Obviously, I have kids in the, starting in the school system. And yeah, I don't know a lot about buildings, but I feel like I do know a bit about schools, maybe from a different point of view. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. So we'll start with Ms. Malinowski.
Hi, Jen. Nice to see you. Jen and I have had several conversations, but not about this one in particular. So I was very happy to see that you put in for this one. And can you kind of explain the school setup when you went through the school system? Because I think that perspective is actually pretty important here to depending on kind of the timing of when you went through it.
Sure, absolutely. So Finn was pretty much how it is now. It was K and 1, and I went to Finn school as my son's there now. And then I went to Neary. Neary was 2nd through 5th. And then I went to Woodward. That was the middle school, 6th through 8. And I did not attend Algonquin Regional High School. I went to a private school. But it's so weird that Woodward is not a middle school now, and we have this big, beautiful middle school.
Okay, great. Thanks for applying, and I look forward to your appointment.
Thanks,
Great.
Chelsea.
Thank you. Mr. Healy.
Hi, Jen, how are you?
Hi.
It's usually people like me who have that sort of trouble with technology, but if that had happened to me about an hour later, I would resurface and you still wouldn't be able to hear me. So kudos.
I know, I don't have an excuse because I lived on.
No,
Zoom
kudos for the quick turnaround. Very impressive. Now, is Milford considered a Blackstone Valley town? I mean, it's close. It is.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
We do
Well, always-
filter. Yep,
yeah.
we filter to Blackstone.
Have you ever gone I know Milford's had a lot of growth. While you've been there, have they gone through a school project that's touched upon you as a teacher? Because that'd be interesting and probably very helpful.
Yes, actually. So part of the reason why I wanted to sit on this board is because one of my best friends in Milford, she's an older woman, she's 80, and she has sat on like 4 building committees in Milford. And the most recent one being the Woodland School, which was like a $75 million school undertaking. And she loved doing it and found it so fascinating. And I found it fascinating too, because they closed one down and they opened the other one and moved it right next to it. So yeah, I mean, there's been so much growth in Milford. We can't, busting at the seams.
Yeah. All right. Great. That perspective is interesting. And it's also having spent time in that old Woodward school. I spent a lot of time in that gymnasium, which was kind of, I think, the only subterranean gymnasium I've ever played in. So, so thanks again for stepping forward. It sounds like you're a very nice fit for the committee.
Thank you, Marty.
Nice to meet you.
Mr. Stivers.
Thank you. And thank you, Jen. Welcome and appreciate your volunteering here. I have a couple of questions. One, have you been following this process in Southborough in terms of the conversations with the advisory committee, the capital planning committee, and others as far as context is concerned for this?
Nice to meet you. Great question. I will not lie. I have not been following it very closely. Like I'm a busy mom with 2 kids juggling all this stuff, and I do want to get involved. And I saw this come out in my Southborough, and I was like, oh, that is something that I am interested in. Obviously, if I was on the committee, I'd be following it a lot more closely.
Sure.
But I don't have a ton of background right now, so I'm
Okay.
kind of a clean slate.
Okay. Have you served on other volunteer committees in Southborough at this point, or this would be your first?
None, no,
Okay.
not in Southborough.
Okay. A totally objective external view then, which is not maybe the worst thing in the world. Unencumbered with some of the local
Different, very
infighting
different.
maybe. And again, I think it's great to have a teacher's perspective on this, not that we're not getting some of this from other committee members, but to me, that's a helpful input. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. And thanks again for volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dennington.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm really happy to hear of your interest. I think it's going to be a great addition to have someone that has your perspective. Are there any kind of lessons learned from Milford, how they did their schools and manage growth and new schools that you think that Southborough should keep in mind?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think. It's so hard to predict how the population can change. I mean, Milford, I don't know if you're familiar with the town, but there's a very clear pattern. There's a huge ELL population, Ecuadorians and Brazilians, and that's who I teach. So that's really been growing, and I know that they had to, work with that, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I just think there's so much that goes into planning a school, the population, but also just education is changing so much, I think. So rethinking certain things. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it's actually that was kind of a difficult question, so I think there's not a really great answer to it, but no, I think that's a fair point. Thank you.
Sure.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. So because we changed the charge at our last meeting, we need to take a vote to increase the residents at large on the Neary School Building Committee back to 4. Obviously, when we did it, we didn't anticipate we'd have somebody step forward so quick. So Jennifer, thank you for that. So I think if we start there and then we can appoint, because I don't want to make sure we do it in the right order. So do we have a motion to adjust the charge for the Neary School Building Committee to 4 citizens at large from 2?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Melanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. Thank you. So that's done. That being said, do we have a motion to appoint Jennifer Donato to the Neary School Building Committee?
So move.
And second.
Thank you. Roll call, Ms. Melanowski. I
Aye.
didn't hear you. Sorry. Thank you, Chelsea. Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Jennifer, thank you so much. You're all set. You'll be getting a letter from the town shortly, letting them know. I believe there's a meeting next Tuesday. So your timing is
Great.
impeccable. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Sorry
you
about
for
that.
volunteering.
Thank you.
You
Take
too.
care.
Nice meeting you all. Bye.
Good luck.
Bye-bye.
as we say.
Yeah. Next up, DPW water rates. Ms. Melanowski.
Thank you. Can we bring over Ms. McAuliffe and Ms. Galligan, please? Thank you. And while they're coming over, and I'm sure Karen will give a brief overview, but the consultant did an analysis like they did maybe 2 years ago on the water rates and made recommendations for increases to the water rates. And it's in our packet for tonight, and I'll let Karen kind of go through the process that the consultant goes through and the recommendations that came out of that. Karen, you're on mute if you're there.
Yeah, I am. I don't know. I don't know why I'm not on camera,
Okay.
but sorry. That one's outside of my knowledge range.
Hang on, I'll try and fix that.
Graduated from the Marty Healy School of Technology.
I was gonna say, Karen, I feel your pain.
So anyway, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at them every year.
Okay, you should have video
Okay, there
now.
I am. Hi. So we're trying to change the rates every year to keep up so we don't do these drastic rate changes all the time. We're finding now that we're in a that we've gone enterprise fund. It's running a little different than we expected, and I do think we're going to need to do a more from scratch check this after our town meeting this year. But for now, because we do want to make sure we're at least moving forward, the recommendation we have is a 3% on the base rate, right? The meters that everyone gets. And then, I'm sorry, 2%. And then a 6.5%, a 7.5% on the tier. What we're trying to do is we had a problem where we're paying right now, if you look at the chart I did, we're paying for water we used in 2020, which was excessive amount. I mean, we just paid for that, sorry. So that money came in this year. We have barely any coming in because we billed very little for 2021, right? It was a really wet year. And so yes, actually, so if you have to look at the chart, and I don't have it in front of me because I'm looking at all of us on Zoom. But what happens is so we're paying a high amount to the MWRA for water this year, but our income is low because we had a wet year. So we didn't collect a lot of money. We also had the issue where we didn't put the rates in exactly the right way. So we didn't get the full increase we had intended. It ended up costing us about $78,000. It doesn't make the difference, unfortunately, with what we have. So we're going to have to take out a retained earnings. And even if you look at our projections, we end up starting to take out, we only get like 1 year at 6.5% every year without taking out a retained earnings. So we do have to look at this in a more holistic or start from scratch way. But for now, in order to keep us moving forward and keeping things not very drastic for next year, or at least less drastic, we're just recommending that we move this rate change for now. We look at it and we try to figure out a way to make sure that we can put ourselves in a position that the changes each year are less of a percent.
Okay, Chelsea, do you want to lead this discussion or do you want me to
Sure.
jump in?
Yeah, so just a few points that I wanted to add in are that this does include all of the capital expenditures Karen through FY26 that would come out of the water fund, right? So that's a good thing. And then with the retained earnings, if you look at it has the target retained earnings as of percent budget. It's under Exhibit B with the 5-year analysis. You can see that the retained earnings as a percentage of budget for FY 21, 22, 23, they're slightly going down every year. So like Karen mentioned, we're going to dip into retained earnings, and that the target of retained earnings as a percentage of budget is to get to 20%. So we're okay to use retained earnings for this year. So I just wanted to point that out. And I know that that's been vetted with Carla on the accounting side. And so I think the takeaway here is that, you know, our assessment continues to go up in terms of water usage for the town of Southborough. And so we're doing an equal distribution of increases across the board over the next several years and trying to keep up with it every year. So is that fair to say, Karen and Carla? Okay, that's it, Lisa. Thank you.
Okay. Carla, did you want to add anything? All right, great. Thank you. We'll go round table. Mr. Healy.
Yeah, and you know, maybe the answer is embedded in this, and I'm just, but is it? What are the combination of factors that are driving this? Is it? I mean, a lot of it obviously is. It sounds like the difference between a dry year and a wet year. But what other factors? Is it cumulative? Is it the overall volume of usage? What are the factors that drive the increase?
So Carla can probably help answer this and probably is much better at it than I am. But our rates, like our whole budget is it needs to be covered by the rates, but then also all our borrowings. And we've done a lot of projects and all that. And we have more to do because we've been trying to keep the system very robust and healthy. So a lot of that money has to be made up with our rates, because it used to be that we used to actually have a lot in water reserves, and a lot of that went to project money. But now we're trying to get our retained earnings so the proverbial sock drawer isn't so full. But Carly can probably help answer a little bit too.
Yes, thanks, Karen. When the water special revenue fund was switched over to the enterprise fund, that was probably 3 years ago. And I'm not sure if everyone took a holistic view of what was happening with the rates and really understood the whole process and the DOR requirements for, the enterprise fund. So now that we're looking and we're working to cover all of the expenses through the rates, and the rates were the same for a long time. And when it was a special revenue fund, it didn't matter because you couldn't really cull it out. You couldn't really see it. Couldn't see the true revenues and expenses. Now we have indirect costs going to water that are increasing every year. You know, we had COVID when people were home, that a lot of water was used. And there was actually, when I spoke with the consultant to go through the water rate study, he had mentioned that, all towns are seeing there's just a slow usage this year due to the wet summer. That's a problem that everyone is facing. So just if after we get through this year, we do have retained earnings, we can cover our costs. It's not a dire situation. We have a good, healthy retained earnings, and we are interested in drawing it down, but we want to have the balance of, reviewing the rates and reviewing retained earnings and looking at it holistically. So that's our plan for now.
Okay, and I mean, it's an interesting conceptual argument. I mean, it is, I guess, the ultimate user fee, in the sense that how much water you use isn't just paying for the water you use, but it's using for the system that gets the water to you through the capital expenditures. So,
Right.
again, I could see disagreement on that, but from my perspective, approaching it that way makes an awful lot of sense. And so I guess I'm not surprised that those are the drivers. So thanks for those answers. I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. Thanks, Karen and Carla. I think this is a reasonable approach, I guess. One of my questions, though, is that we learned that the FY23 MWRA assessment dropped a material amount for us for 23. I'm assuming that assumption is in here, plugged in here, the latest data.
Yeah.
What do you, how do you account for, how have you projected future MWAR assessments? I know that they're struggling with trying to figure out, was 22, 20, 21, and 22 unusual years as their flows, particularly Boston, dropped off dramatically, pushing a lot of the cost, the fixed cost onto other water communities. And I don't think they've got a great answer for what's going to happen beyond 23 at this point. What assumptions have you plugged in for that? Do you expect that assessment is going to be flat, or again, what do you think is going to happen there as far as these numbers are concerned?
I can take that, Karen. I did discuss that with the consultant we had spoken, because I really wanted to know what was in the meat of his rate studies, if his numbers are reasonable and were raises included and capital and new capital and all of that. And there's actually a tab, Sam, where it's all about MWRA. I don't believe it's in the packet, but I can forward that to you. And it shows it's not just like a flat increase. There's the whole methodology to it. And I'm happy to share that with you.
Is this something that the MWRA provided or the consultant projected?
The consultant projected.
Okay,
yeah.
So yeah, I've not seen anything come out of MWRA that says they feel they've got a good handle on that. They're struggling with what the future is going to hold here, given the pandemic effects. So, okay, I'd be interested in seeing that if you could forward that to me. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm okay with the general direction here. I mean, it seems to me that we've got to adjust, and this is a reasonable way to adjust. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Andrew?
I'm also okay with the recommendations. I see it as continuing a policy that began in a prior year, correcting for the billing error. I had one practical question on attachment A to the memo, and it is a spreadsheet of the water rate study. So at the bottom, it shows applying the new rates, right, to average bills for typical consumers, right? And it's interesting, comparing the average residential rate and then to the higher end residential, and there's just enormous difference. So do you know just generally how many people in town are in that high end residential category? And is that based on usage, right? So that they're paying water bills of, several $1,000s a year. Is it just a small number of people, a lot of people, or?
We do have that. He does obviously work it out. So we have how many people fall in each tier.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. Partly when we do the rates, they're partly called conservation rates, so that you're trying to keep people from, it's a weird balance, right? We're trying not to, we need the money, but we're trying to conserve water, right? So the rate, but yeah, that high tier that at $10, I mean, it's still less than buying a bottled water, but to drink. But if you're spraying it on your lawn, it's a lot of money. But we can get you the amounts, like the amount of people. It's embedded in that spreadsheet.
Oh, okay. Thanks. That's all
Right.
I've got.
Thank you, Andrew. My questions have been answered. Chelsea, do you want to have anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing is, I think it was 2 years ago when we had bills coming out from a dry period of time. There were a lot of questions that came up from people's water bills. So I'd like to be proactive in letting residents know that water bills are going to be increasing. So open to ideas, Karen, if you have any on how to get that out. And, maybe it goes with the next bill and the subsequent bill with just a note saying to expect your water bill will increase because the rates are increasing.
That year we had put it on the bills that it was coming up. It ended up that people didn't still realize it. The bills, the water used in March is going to be at the new rate. March, April, May is basically the June billing. So it's a collection in July. So it's the FY23. So that's why we wanted to vote them now, so that the water usage now you get one, that first quarter of the new billing is at a lower usage. Generally, there's not as much usage this time of year. We can put it at the transfer station, as far as on the we obviously put it on the website, but we can see if we can get it as an alert on the website. And then also, I know Vanessa will tweet stuff, and then we also, like I said, we'll put it on the water rates changing, look at the website on the way to the transfer station. It's very hard for me to get information out. So I'm open to anything else. We do send out a mailer usually about hydrant flushing, and we can add it to that and say water rates are changing. I don't know how many people read the hydrant mailer either, because we always get calls about the hydrant. Is a running hydrant, what's happening? So, like I said, people aren't interested in what the DPW is up to until it affects them. And then they're like, oh, I should ask. So I think that would help. I did have with the MTC thing that's coming up, I did ask them to ask a question of like where they would like to find the information or how they like to go and get stuff, because it's clearly not working, whatever we're doing. I'm not getting the information out as well as it should. So hopefully people have some good ideas.
Thank you, Karen. Also, I think it might be useful where I think this is going to become a big topic that maybe we even put this on the banner on the town's website as well. Something that easy to find if somebody's looking for the information, Karen, and they're not quite sure where to go. That might be another avenue, but I think that the news flash that comes out through the emails, I think that's very important. A lot of people get those as well. So those are a couple of another. Go ahead, Chelsea.
So I was just going to say, I think the challenge here is the first bill, you're probably not going to notice it, which I think is what happened the last time that this happened, right? So it's the second bill. So we just have to remind ourselves to put it back on the news flash when the second cycle comes through, because that will be the, the sprinklers will be on or irrigation, whatever, pool usage. So.
Okay.
And Lisa, there's a hand up. I'm not sure if it's on this topic or not.
Thank you. Can we bring Mr. Fling over? Thank you, Chelsea, for watching that. Good evening, Mr. Fling.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Welcome.
Pretty good. I just had one question that Karen might be able to answer on this topic, if I'm allowed to ask it.
Of course, go ahead.
So with the way the rate structure is, how does this affect multifamily properties at the higher usage rates? Are they at some kind of, back foot sort of situation here because their usage is higher, or how does that work?
So multifamily, it depends. If they have 1 meter, then they're billed as though they're a high user, right? So it's one bill, and then that either the landlord can either distribute that through the people, or right, because I think now I don't think for rentals water has to be paid by the landlord. It used to be, or because it's a business, basically. If the landlord owns it, he just pays it, and that is basically a business cost. Or the other option is if it's condos, they're individually, all the condos are individually metered. So it doesn't matter that you're attached to somebody else. and even if you shared a water service, you have a separate meter.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, it answers it for sure. Yeah, I have a multifamily and it's 1 meter, so I think it's getting built at the high usage. And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to split that out to a tenant without having separate meters. So anybody that would be in my situation would be in the same predicament at the higher rate.
Yes, but you could sub-meter within yourself too. You know, with the plumbing meters, you know, basically they could go in, a plumber could do it and meter at each entrance to each apartment. I don't know what that costs in relation to what you pay for water, but if you're up at the $10 range, it's probably worth it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fling. All right, I see no other hands up. Karen, before we need to make a motion to approve the water rates as presented.
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Melanowski,
Aye.
Mr. Haley,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. That piece is taken care of. Karen, I'm going to have you hold on for just 1 second. I'm actually going to move up item D under the consent agenda. I was going to hold this anyway. So I just wanted to let the board know why this is on here, that the prior tree warden, Mr. Leroy, has agreed to stay on as an interim until we can put a plan in place as to what we need to do. So I would be asking the board to do this through 6/30/22.
How are we going to pay for that? Is this an hourly rate or back to the stipend pro rata somehow, or? how's
Back
it
to the
work?
stipend, Sam.
Okay.
And I figure if there's any questions while Karen's here, it just seemed to be a good fit with him understanding the process and having what the credentials of, you know, with experience, what's required. So it just seemed like a good fit. And that gives us time to figure out what it is we want to do. And we can always potentially, if he's willing, extend it if we needed to. So that would take us through some of the hearings that are going to take place for the trees we spoke about prior and the Deerfoot Road.
And technically, he's not a certified arborist, but he has the qualifications required under state law, is my understanding. Is that correct?
He does, exactly, Sam. He has the experience and the certifications that are needed. So I just figured if there were any questions, while Karen was here, we could ask her. Andrew, you look puzzled. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm not puzzled, but I was just, one of the ways to prepare for the meeting is, you know, we read the minutes of the last meeting and I was remembering. So at the April 4 meeting, Karen, are you going to have some more feedback from quotes you got from other people?
I did get some quotes. I sent them to, I think I sent them to Ms. Malinowski and Ms. Braccio. I got one for 110, one for 90, but he's a tree removal service company.
So Andrew, I'm sorry, Karen, I'm just going to jump in. Andrew, this isn't on the agenda. We'll have it
Okay.
on to ask. I just don't want to veer too far off of what's posted on the agenda. So we'll get that information for you, Andrew, that we have, and then we'll schedule it for the 5th, just for any updates as well. Because then we can update where we stand with the hearings as well, if that's okay.
Okay.
Again, I just
yeah,
don't want to veer too far.
I
off.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand your point. The reason I just raised it here is because once we do the interim appointment through 6/30, we want to have a process in place so that we're prepared to make the next decision effective.
Correct. And we're working towards that, Andrew.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. And we'll do an update on the 5th as well. Sam, did you have anything?
Nope, all set.
Okay. That being said, then, do we have a motion to appoint an interim tree warden through 6/30/22? Mr. Leroy,
So move.
thank you.
Second.
Is there, thank you. Roll call. Everybody's moving on their screens now. So Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Haley,
Aye, and Karen,
Mr. Den-
thank the gentleman for being willing to do this.
absolutely. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Ms. Braccio. Aye. Great. Thank you. And thank you, Karen. Much appreciated. And thank you, Carla, too, as well. All right, let's take care of just a couple other things. We have 20 minutes before advisory comes in. Anything we don't get done, we'll just try to tack on to the end of that. Now, Mr. Vanessa, did you say Mr. Cadron is here?
Yes,
I
he is.
believe. So
Yep.
we're gonna jump around a little bit. We're gonna go to other matters B, the approval use of public way for the Honest Scholar production. The gentleman from the production company is here. Instead of having him wait until after the advisory discussion, kind of makes sense to welcome Mr. Cadron. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Nice to see you all again.
Nice to see you. So if you want to just take a second and just kind of update us what it is that you're looking for from the town.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I have to apologize quickly. We are on lunch and there's about 120 people that might come through a door on the other side. So we are currently in St. Mark's having a fantastic time here. Lieutenant Achilles, rather Chief Achilles and Lieutenant Newell have been fantastic. Vanessa, you've been great. So we're making our days and we're making progress here. Saturday is the last day of filming for this entire project, and we have a few shots that we're looking to acquire. And while we're in town, logistically, it makes sense to try to capture them close by where all of our vehicles are. So the one proposition that we have for a plate shot, as we call it, is for Route 30, Boston Road, eastbound. As you, I'm sure, are well aware, it's a causeway that goes across over to Route 9. And what we're looking to accomplish here is kind of what we call an establishing shot. It would result in a probably 2 to 3 second moment in the film. But this particular road is really advantageous to us from a visual effects perspective, because this establishing shot is looking to kind of be the perspective coming into Boston down Route 2 from Arlington. And Route 30, this causeway, is advantageous because on either side of it, there's water. That water could be painted from a visual effects perspective, and we could present that shot as Route 2 coming into Boston. And so what this would entail from a logistical perspective would be to work with Lieutenant Newell and the Southborough Police Department to have police details on either side of Route 30 to hold traffic for 1 minute to 2 minutes at a time, while we obey the laws of traffic with our picture cars, 1950s, 1960s cars, and one of which would have a camera mounted to the hood. We would drive in our proper lanes just to establish a shot with our picture correct vehicles, pull off of the side of the road, and the traffic would be released. We would reset our shot and probably do it upwards of maybe 5 times. It's a very simple shot, so it shouldn't take very long, but it would involve stopping traffic briefly. We're looking, would request to do the our call at St. Mark's is tentatively 12 or 1 p.m. depending on how successful tomorrow is for us. That could adjust our day a little bit. And we would do this before our call. So in the morning, between the hours of 9 and 1 p.m. We don't think it will take that entire time. We're just requesting that block to respect the police detail, as well as give ourselves a little bit of buffer if that call time does change. But really, it's a simple establishing shot, and with the full looking to work with the cooperation of the police department. I spoke with Lieutenant Newell today, who seemed confident that this would be accomplishable. And he's actually been by set a couple times, given him some espresso and some coffee. He's had a good time here. But I also want to just take the opportunity to thank you all for Hood, and hopefully haven't disturbed anyone's plans or the neighborhood at large too much. I'm making lots of friends and having a lot of fun wrapping out this movie here in Southborough. So thank you very much for that opportunity as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So you don't anticipate it being a 4-hour shoot. It could be anywhere between 9 and 1. It could potentially take 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, depending on how it goes.
Correct.
But you don't anticipate the full 4 hours though.
Correct. No, and any time that we would use the police to hold traffic, that would take a minute or 2. So cumulative, our presence would probably stop traffic of no more than 5 minutes to 10 at most across the entire time of our presence there.
Okay. All right, Mr. Stivers, we'll start with you.
Question. So am I correct in understanding that you want to do this tomorrow?
No, sir. We would look to do this Saturday morning.
Saturday morning. Okay. And okay, just trying to think of other things that are going on Saturday. I'm not aware of any other events around at that time. I don't know if others are. I mean, in terms, again, of the total stop time of 5 minutes or so, I don't see that as a significant problem. I'm sure we'll get some complaints about it, but that seems to me to be a reasonable thing. So I guess I would not oppose that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Mr. Dennington.
Yeah, I have the same. Again, so you're saying as a practical matter, the stoppage of the traffic is just like 5 minutes, 10 minutes in total?
In total, at a time would be 1 to 2 minutes tops, not even. The bridge, Route 30 bridge there is not very long. It would take us about 30 seconds to cross, at which point our picture vehicles would safely pull off the road. Traffic would resume. We would reset with the assistance of the officers and then go again at 30 seconds at a time.
Okay. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Malinowski.
I'm good with this. It doesn't impact school buses. That would be my only thought, but Saturday shouldn't be a problem.
Great, thank you. Mr. Healy.
Yeah, not disruptive at all. And we want to be as welcoming as possible because we want Hollywood to come back. So
Although
Thank you.
Marty, the picture is going to be of Arlington. It's not going to be of.
I don't care what they make it of as long as they film it in Southborough.
That part had me a little disappointed, but I understand we're not the artistic director.
All right. And Mr. Carter, nice to see you again.
Likewise, thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the use of the Causeway for the Honest Scholar Productions on Saturday from potentially 9 to 1 with anticipated stoppages of no more than 1 to 2 minutes at a time?
So move.
Is there a second? Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Healy.
Hi.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
And Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you so much. You are all set, and we hope you've enjoyed your time in Southborough.
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to see you all. Have a wonderful rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
All right. So, I'm just trying to see what we can get through that's the quickest. Probably let's go through the minutes. Does anybody have any holds on the minutes from March 1st?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just check.
Okay, Sam, why don't you check? Actually, it looks like it was just,
Nope, nothing on March 1st, sorry.
okay,
15th.
perfect. Okay, any on March 8th?
Nope.
And the 15th, Sam, why don't you start?
I have one small one. Line 31, I would say the Public Works Planning Board has not met recently instead of has not met. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other edits? Go ahead, Andrew.
On line 141, I would like to have he changed to Mr. Dennington, because we're counting a back and forth between me and Mr. Malinowski. This makes it more clear who said what.
Okay, was that the only one, Andrew?
I believe so. Let me double check. Yep, that's
Yep.
the only one.
Okay,
Again,
Chelsea, did you
minutes
have?
were very good.
Say, Marty, did you have any? All right, then, do we have a motion to approve open session meeting minutes, March 1st, March 8th, March 15th as amended?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Healy,
Hi.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. Great. Now we have B and C. I'm going to hold C because I just want to speak to that for a minute. So does anyone have any objections to B, which is the memorandum of understanding for SEMA, the latest and last? Okay, do we have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding for SEMA as
So
presented?
move. So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Healy,
Hi.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
Aye.
and Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you. The reason we have the reaffirm the vote for the ARPA expenditures, we talked about the mailing up to the 2,000, but we never officially took a vote. So I'd like to do that tonight, just so that it is on the record. Do we have a motion to approve up to $2,000 as an ARPA expenditure for a mailing?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Healy,
Aye.
Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski,
No.
and Ms. Braccio, no. So, okay, we're all set there. That brings us down to, we have 11 minutes. Andrew, if you want to start on the public comment for the MBTA community, I believe that was you that worked with
Yep.
Mimi and, okay, if you want to start on that and we'll see how far we get into that. I will just say to you though, Mimi did send me a note and just ask that the board not sign this tonight, no matter where we go, that planning board is reviewing it on Monday and they'd like it to be submitted from both boards. So at least we can generally agree on content. So Andrew, why don't you give us?
Yeah,
an
and I
overview
also
of-
spoke with Mimi, just
You
before
did.
this meeting,
Okay.
and so because it is a joint letter, went through a process of a couple different revisions. Dorian did the first draft, and then we had some edits. I mean, basically, the intent here was to make a couple comments that were really, things that were specific to Southborough, and maybe make the point about how, like, the theme of the letter is our town demonstrates how the one size fits all approach might not work to achieve the objectives that you're looking to achieve. So that the Dorian, Mimi, and I traded this draft around a couple times, and we've got it in a form that we think we can all get behind. There is a March 31st deadline to get this letter in. So, this has been a couple of weeks in the works of drafts going through back and forth. And what we're hoping is that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that this board can okay this, and then planning okays it. And then between their Monday meeting and the 31st, that the chair of this board and the planning board would sign this letter, and we would get off before. Unfortunately, I don't think Shop C is meeting before the 30th, or the 31st. So I think it ultimately is just going to be a letter from planning and the select board.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We'll start with Chelsea.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Was there any discussion related to the impact that this could have on schools?
In terms of the letter, no.
Yeah, like what this, and like if you're adding this type of density, what the impact could have on school population.
No. I mean,
Okay,
one
I
of-
did look.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I did compare a few other towns' letters, and that was definitely a common theme in others. So I just wanted to know if you talked about it or.
Yeah, I mean, in the process of the different drafts that went back and forth, from the first draft, my input that I think the three of us got behind was to kind of tone it down a little bit, because some of the first draft was, I just think taking and I'm mindful of what Sam said here. He attended some of these forums where it sounded like the state was going to take up, not inclined to change much, but I thought that things that came across as just kind of just complaining a lot, or that sounded like that had echoes of kind of suburban anti-40B arguments, were not going to be as successful as, this is pointing out here, we're in a unique position where the train station is located right by a pretty historic part of town, the Sudbury River. If you think practically about implementing a big new MBTA district here, this is what it would mean. So that's why we kind of stressed those arguments, rather than, for example, there was in a prior draft that said this is an unfunded mandate. We just took that out, instead pointed out, well, look, it's going to cost a lot of money to actually do some of these studies that you're talking about. Ultimately, there's going to be so many different letters that we thought particularizing it to Southborough made sense, and the school's concern is one that would be addressed right by every town would have that same concern.
So I guess the other letters addressed, is the state cognizant of the impact that this could have on schools, and are they going to increase reimbursement.
Well, from
If
the other
schools were-
letters, probably
right?
the town will become
Yeah.
aware of the state, but
Okay,
there's
I
also
just-
just a very practical
I mean, we're-
part of this.
Yeah, also on point number 5, I think that that's just muddying the argument. I really don't think that that's a good argument. I think, talking about the septic and the location is more relevant. I just think saying that we're gonna pay for something that isn't possible, like, I don't know that we know that it's not possible. I think even if we do a zone, that doesn't mean that we're gonna knock down all these houses to be able to build something. So I personally would take it out. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I just think that it misses the other points made above. And I think maybe for me, that would be toning down the letter a little bit. And I know that you said you already did that, but that's something that I would.
Okay, Mr. Healy.
Yeah, Andrew, I appreciate your efforts to tone it down. My reaction when I read it was, this needs to be toned down. And I still think that. I agree with what Chelsea just said about the word onerous does not belong in there from a community with the per capita income and otherwise profile of Southborough. That is, I can't imagine, a comment more falling on deaf ears than something like that. We Southborough can't afford this stuff. I mean,
This is listed last.
I'm sorry?
It's listed last.
I understand. I take it out. And I've got, again, I think there's some language in there that accomplishes what, at least in my view, is the purpose of the letter, which is to say, essentially, I think this letter should say, we've reviewed and become familiar with the statute and proposed regulations by the state. We understand and support the state's efforts in that regard. We write this to request that the state provide more flexibility for the various communities. And from Southborough's perspective, we offer the following observations and take out stuff like non-productive or unattainable. They don't care. And again, that really sounds in NIMBY, quite frankly. I would just tone it down. All we want to do is say, we get it. This is a state priority. We understand it's coming. We just think we need more flexibility across the board. Here are Southborough's observations, period. Onerous out, non-productive out, anything like that out. I think, quite frankly, those are non-productive.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. I guess I sort of waffle on this one. I think that, as I had mentioned earlier, I agree with Marty. I don't think they care. On the other hand, I think there are things in here that are substantial overreach. If you look at what the actual would be better. And so I guess, again, I think I side with Marty on this one. Let's tone it down a little and keep our fingers crossed and hope for the worst, which is going to happen, I think, here in terms of these requirements. I think it can be an interesting question down the road in terms of what many communities are struggling with. Does it make sense to forsake the lost grant money versus what it might cost us in terms of actually doing this? And I think some communities have pointed out that, in fact, the guidelines have much broader language in terms of the penalties and the consequences than is in the legislation. So hopefully somebody else will carry the water on that one and maybe create some pressure to narrow that penalty aspect of it and give us a little more flexibility there. But in the near term, I think we make our best shot at it and expect that probably not going to have much difference. Discouraging, but I think that's where I am. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sam. So Andrew, I'm some level along the same lines. I had questioned number 5 as well, if that even had to be in here. I will tell you, I think there's some great points in here, Andrew. I think most of the homes that abut the train tracks in Southborough are some of the most reasonably priced homes. in the
Yes.
town of Southborough. And I think you've made the point that to lose those for something that they're, again, with the no affordability component written in, not that I would advocate potentially for all of them, but to
Mhm.
have not that component not be there, and for Southborough to lose some homes that are actually reasonably priced and are able to draw in some level of mixed housing in Southborough. So I think if we could just tone it down a bit, I also would support taking 5 out. I question that as well, with being Southborough and looking at, all the factors, the demographics of Southborough. But other than that, I think you did make some good points. I appreciate the effort that you guys made in this. I know Planning Board is going to discuss it on Monday as well. So be interesting to see what they say. I would imagine, again, we're under kind of a tight deadline to get this to the state. I don't think we're ready to sign it, obviously, tonight. The only way would be to have potentially a morning meeting, maybe next week, to take a look at a draft that comes back from Planning Board as well, and the board decide whether they want to sign it and whether they're ready to go. I'm certainly not ready to sign it tonight and to sign off on it tonight without seeing where we end up.
I'm okay with deputizing Andrew to sort it out. And go ahead and do whatever he thinks makes sense.
Yeah, I think to Marty's point, when you said we, the key of this is anything which is jointly signed by the planning board and the select board. The we is the select board and the planning board. And this draft has already been through. The discussion we're having now, I believe the planning board already had one of these discussions. So it's, it just is what it is with our schedule that, I can understand it's a difficult thing. You're seeing it for the first time and feel that there's a deadline, but I'm happy to try to move it, to take it over the finish line. And it's just administratively thinking about how we do that before now. And yeah, maybe a quick morning meeting is something we could do.
Okay, let's just see, Marty, how comfortable are you with putting our signature and based on the comments? Andrew can certainly share the comments we've made tonight.
And there's value in having one letter, which is signed by both boards.
I agree.
Rather than separate letters with slightly different tones. And
I guess, Lisa, I if other folks are comfortable with this, it's a kind of a little bit of a hybrid of Sam's. I would be comfortable with this approach that Andrew continue to be our designated scrivener for coming up with a final product. And if that final product is acceptable to the chair, then she can sign on behalf of the select board. I'd be comfortable with that approach.
Okay.
Works for me.
Okay, Chelsea? Okay, so I am away next week, but I can certainly read it, and Mark can certainly, the townhouse has my signature. They can certainly put it on there. Either that, or if the board's more comfortable, I know Chelsea's available. We could change it to the vice chair and Chelsea could come in and sign it. Whatever the board's will. I'm fine either way.
so you want to take out paragraph 5 and just
Yes.
summarizing the other part, Marty, that you didn't like.
It's just it's at the end of the first paragraph where it talks about unproductive and something else.
Yeah, non-productive and unattainable.
Unattainable. Yeah. Okay, who cares?
Is difficult, challenging.
I will, again, I'm happy to defer to you and Ms. Braccio on getting comfort with that
I was
language.
hoping for. Okay. Is there a different word you would use, or is that all right?
That's fine. Challenging. I like challenging.
Challenging.
So is the board comfortable with a digital signature for me? Or if the board prefers a real signature, Chelsea can certainly come in. We can have her sign it as vice chair. Up to the board.
Digital's fine with me.
Okay. All right, Andrew.
So I will move the approach that I suggested.
Second.
I like that. Mr. Healy.
I'm comfortable with my approach. Aye.
All right,
done.
Mr. Stivers,
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
And Ms. Braccio. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. We will take care of that. All right, look at this. So that leaves us to our last item on the agenda. Welcome to advisory. Thank you for joining us tonight. Kathy, I see you have 3. If you'd like, we can, I'm just trying to see who else we have. Somebody's under the town of Southborough with their hand raised. I'm not quite sure who that is.
I think that might be Mr. Martell.
Okay, that's perfect. If we could bring him over. So Kathy, are you expecting your full committee tonight?
Vanessa, Tim's gone to the ARPA meeting. The two that, I don't know, understand where Andrew Pfaff is. We were just talking, so he's got to be someplace.
I think that's
Oh,
So we're
there he
missing
is.
Andrew Pfaff
there he
Oh,
is.
okay.
and Adam. So watch for Adam to come in. So there's
Okay.
five that's supposed to be here too. Tim has gone to ARPA, so he won't be here. But
Okay.
we've got some thoughts that we're going to relay from him. And then Tom Wilson won't be here. So we should have 5 in the end, but 4 is our quorum. So we're ready to go. We got 4 here.
Okay, do you want to call your meeting to order, Kathy?
I do. So I'm calling the advisory committee meeting to order for its second meeting of the night at 7:37 p.m. on March 24th.
Great, thank you. So Kathy, this is kind of what I was thinking as a process as we go forward. I know that you had sent a memo kind of giving us advisory's positions on some of the items. Thank you. One of the things I was thinking is something we hadn't done yet, but we were looking to do is kind of we'll do a consent type agenda. I'm going to go through the individual budgets. And if there's someone on the Board of Selectmen or advisory that would like to hold it for a further discussion, we can certainly do that. And then we can move forward that way. Is that amenable to you, Kathy? Does that seem like a good path to start?
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. So anyone from advisory and or Board of Selectmen, if you'd like to hold, I'm going to read the budget. If you'd like to hold it, you can either raise your hand or you can just unmute and say hold, please. 114 moderator budget. I see none. Okay, it's probably easier if someone has something to unmute. Either that or Chelsea, would you mind looking if somebody raises a hand? So I thank you. Much appreciated. Elected Select Board 121. 122 Select Board. 131 Advisory. 132 Reserve Fund.
Hold.
Hold. Okay, thank you. 135 Town Accountant. 136 Audit. 140 Elected Assessors. 141 Assessors. 145 Treasurer Collector. 151 Town Council. 152 Personnel Board. 153 Special Legal Counsel. 154 MTC, Municipal Technology.
Hold.
Okay. 155 Information Technology. 159 Other Operational Support. 160 Elected Clerk. 161 Town Clerk. 171 Conservation Commission. 175 Planning Board.
Hold.
Okay. 176 Zoning Board of Appeals. 177 Open Space. 182 Economic Development.
Hold.
192 Facilities Department. 193 ADA, I'm going to hold that one. 210 Police Department. 220 Fire Department.
Hold.
Okay, thank you. 241 Building Department. 291 Civil Defense.
Hold.
292 Animal Control Officer. 420, 430, 490 DPW. 510 Elected Board of Health Salaries.
No, never mind. Sorry.
Lisa, I'm not going to vote on that one, so hold it, but just so I can abstain.
That's fine. So I'm sorry, did I miss somebody on the DPW? Are we all? No,
No.
okay, great. That's fine. So 512 Board of Health, Chelsea, you're gonna abstain from that as well?
Hold. Hold. Hold the
510
Board of
and
Health
Kathy
budget.
wanted,
Okay, I'm sorry. Kathy, go ahead. You wanted 510 held or
No,
512?
I want the actual Board of Health budget held, not the.
512.
512.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you. 541 Council on Aging. 542 Youth Commission. 543 Veteran Services. 610 Library. Kathy, I'm
Hold.
assuming,
Hold.
yeah, thank you. 630 Recreation.
Hold.
Hold, okay. 691 Historical Commission. 692 Memorial Day. And then, let's see, are there any holds for the schools? And I won't read them individually unless there's a hold.
Algonquin.
Algonquin, okay, thank you. Okay, I see no others. And then we have benefits. I'm assuming no holds there. Unclassified benefits, liability insurance. And there we go. Okay. All right, so why don't we go back to reserve fund? Kathy, that was your hold, I believe?
This is just a comment, just to make sure everybody has thought about this. The reserve fund last year was intended to be 180,000. It got increased at the end because of the issues we had with the Board of Health budget, specifically the copier. So we added $10,000 toward the very end to allow for the copier to be purchased if it turned out that the new IT director decided that was a way to satisfy the HIPAA concerns. It ended up not going through the reserve fund, it ended up actually going through the IT budget. So I'm just telling you, it was an arbitrary $10,000. Advisory is fine with 190. I just want to make sure you guys know, remember that we did arbitrarily add $10,000 to it. We've never used the whole reserve fund for the most part. This year, even with all the things that we contingently back, we're still going to be fine, we think, unless something pops up in the next couple of months. So it's 190, which is the same as last year. So I think advisory is fine with it, but we didn't know what select board thought about going back to 180, keeping it 190. So that's the only reason I held it.
Okay, we'll zip around real quick. Chelsea?
So I would put it back to 180. I mean, there was a reason why we increased it by 10, and I don't remember a time that we went over on the reserve fund, so I'd be in favor of going back to 180.
Okay, Marty?
Kathy, do you all want it at 190? Or do you not care?
We were fine. We were fine with 190. No one really was trying to push it back to 180. I would vote for 180, but the majority of the advisories seem to be fine with 190. So
You've convinced me, Kathy. I'm with Chelsea, 180.
Okay, Mr. Stivers.
180.
Mr. Dennington.
Kathy, I'm glad you reminded us of that, because I think 180 makes sense.
Okay. And I would support that as well. Kathy, do you want to have any discussion with advisory,
I
please?
want advisory to weigh in on this because
Yep.
I'm basically going against the majority here. So
Okay.
let everybody have a chance to weigh in on this.
I'm okay with 180, Kathy. I mean, we talked about it in our meeting. It could go either way. But I think we just got to keep an eye on it if we start to reduce maybe some of the revolving accounts, et cetera, in the future to make sure that we have cover for things. But 180 should work for next year.
Eric?
My only hesitation is the uncertainties we're seeing around fuel prices and some of the other things that do drive various department budgets like DPW and others. 10 grand's a relatively small number overall, but personally, I wouldn't mind having that cushion, just given all the uncertainty, but I'm not gonna throw my hat on the floor or get upset about it.
As a reminder, there's another way to cover, a shortfall in a line, which is within that department's budget itself. So you've got the ability to move in many cases within a department budget if you exceed one line item and you've got some fluff in another one. So you've got another way to cover things besides just reserve fund.
Yeah,
Marcy?
no, absolutely. The more we've had a lot of conversations with various departments, and there just is a lot of uncertainty out there. I mean, that's the boogeyman that everyone wants to bring up. So I like and also especially I look at DPW. They cut very aggressively this year, and I know they're also seeing some overages currently this year. Again, I think they feel like they'll be okay to cover. So that's just that's my piece. Again, I think 10 grand is not going to make or break us, but.
And they have adjusted the budget for fuel a little bit, but the DPW is a little bit concerning because if you look at the way it was put together, water too, there are most line items with a 0% increase. And we questioned Karen about it. She's still comfortable with it, but it was an unusual look as far as a budget goes. Marcy?
I think 180 sounds fine based on our prior discussion. So I'm in favor of that.
Okay, that's it for advisories, Lisa.
Okay, that's great. That takes us down to Municipal Technology Committee. Chelsea, you held this?
I did.
Okay.
And I did not get to talk to Mr. Probst about this, but I did have a question as to why the survey software was in this budget and not in the IT budget. And also I was curious about the flyers for town meeting. So those two total $2,000, I think. So I did not get to him yet. I will try to do that before our next meeting.
And I will add, I was supposed to do that, Chelsea, and it slipped off my list of things to do. So that's on me. I was supposed to have taken that on and I didn't. So we can certainly take care of that. I don't know, Kathy, have you guys had any discussion? Has NTC been to advisory yet?
Yes, we we did a joint meeting with MPC and IT as far as the IT budget. We did
Okay.
not talk to, they were there for IT, not to talk about their budget.
Okay,
It's a tiny thing. So we did not get into the MPC budget, and I'd encourage everyone to, not necessarily, for lack of a better term, penny pinch those guys. Those guys have given us an awful lot of benefits since they were formed, and the things they've done as far as donating time to help us. So anyway, so take a look at it and then we can talk about it. So no, we did not talk to them about their budget.
okay. So I don't think, Kathy, I'll just add, I don't think it's penny pitching. I think it's whether it's living in the right budget. I don't know that there's, from my point of view, and Chelsea, you can certainly speak to it because you held this. Where it's software, it should actually live in the IT budget. So I don't know, Chelsea, was that your concern?
It was, yeah.
That's a whole different, what budget's in is fine. It's not going to change the number, so that's fine.
Okay. Marty, did you have anything? Andrew, Sam, on the concern that Chelsea had? Okay. Kathy, I don't know if you want, like we said, Chelsea volunteered, thank you, to reach out to Matt. And, I think it's just a matter of switching it from where it should live is all.
Chelsea should just let us know what she talked about with
Okay.
Matt, and we'll go from there.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I don't know if anyone else on advisory had anything they wanted to add on that. And certainly, if you have something to add, raise your hand, jump in. I don't, by any means, there's a lot of faces on the screen. I don't want to miss anybody. So thank you.
I think they
next-
said no.
Okay, great. Planning board.
So that I held that one. And the reason why I held it was we had put in the minute taker policy, and I believe that planning board was looking to reallocate the SHOPSI and master plan minutes to something else. And so I just had some questions. I just, when we put the budgets together, and then, we have a policy change that takes something away, I don't think it's good practice to then just reallocate it somewhere else. Like if they're looking to do something more, I think it should be included in the request up front. So.
Board of Selectmen, questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a
On that-
comment, Lisa.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Sam.
I think master plan is going to be done by the end of the fiscal year, so I don't think the MPC minutes are an issue here. And I think the planning board is an independently elected body, so I think they've got some latitude to, do what they think is the right thing for the planning board on this one, in some ways, regardless of the overall policy, frankly. So I give them flexibility.
Sorry, Mr. Healy, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the flexibility, but I think Chelsea's right that it should be transparent flexibility. And I don't think that exists right now. And it just might be because it's been recent. So I give them the benefit of the doubt on that. So I'm agreeing with both of you.
Very, very lawyer-like.
Sorry. I guess, Chelsea, we can reach out and ask them how they plan to reallocate that. Kathy, sorry, Andrew, go ahead and then we'll go
Yeah,
to advisory.
just come back to Chelsea's point. How much money are we talking about?
3,600.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not the money, it's the principle.
No, I understand, but that's I didn't know the number. That's I think that is worth asking about.
Okay, Kathy, any comments from advisory? I mean, Chelsea can certainly get the answer and get that to advisory as well.
I think
But-
we know the answer, don't we, Brian? We know we saw what Karina said that they were going to put it to. So we know where they put it. They just took the money and put it elsewhere, or it's rather arbitrarily. So I'm with Chelsea on this. We'll see what everybody else says on advisory. This is the only group, I think, that did this, which is when they were told they needed to take the cost of the minute takers out, which they didn't seem to challenge. You would think that that's what they'd bring up. What are we going to do as far as minute taker? They didn't challenge the new policy. they just said, okay, fine, we'll take that money and put it elsewhere. And it was, I don't think they really thought through it. So I think that they should be asked to reduce their overall budget by the cost of the minute taking that was taken out.
Sorry, Andrew, I'll come back to you. I'll just let Kathy go through
Okay.
advisory first, just so everyone has a chance.
Eric,
Had to do it. Sorry. Yeah, I agree. Just on principle, I don't like the idea of saying, hey, this is something we need to reduce, and then saying, cool, we'll cut the line item, but push it someplace else. So if there's a justification for needing that money elsewhere. I haven't heard that, but I'd certainly want to hear that.
Marcy,
I agree. I think we should find out more about, what decision was made there, and if we were asked to drop that cost or move it to another area, it makes sense that we should be transparent. So,
AP.
Yeah, I agree but I do see something for 1,500 for bylaw amendment support services and 1,700 for zoning map update assistance services. So that's in theory what they're targeting that 3,600 towards. So those are new FY23 things they added to their budget. I don't know whether or not those are legitimate or not, but at least they have them earmarked for something.
So we're going to meet with them in a couple of weeks. And that was going to be on our list to talk about as far as that goes. So I don't know how you guys want to handle this one. It sounds like we are in most agreement that if the need that they have now allocated to is appropriate, then you leave it. And if it's not, it comes out.
Yep. Agreed, Kathy.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Andrew, AD, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I just had a process question. I guess it's for both you and Kathy. So I thought that April 5th, right? So that's the next select board meeting is the meeting to sign the warrant.
Correct.
Right? Okay, so is the purpose of this meeting kind of just narrow down what, if any, I don't want to say disagreements, but issues, things to think about further between advisory or select board is, and then have another meeting to iron it out, or to try to get everything done in this meeting, or is it to try to settle everything out by the April 5th?
Well, I think, Andrew, that's twofold. I mean, it'd be a perfect world if, we could all be on the same page at the end of this meeting, but, there's certainly the opportunity if we need to meet again, of course, it's always there. But I think tonight we just wanted to see, and Kathy, you can certainly jump in as well. I think the goal was to see where we're at in the budget and where our differences, if any, may be. And, so we could work towards, obviously it benefits the taxpayer if we can come together and present a united front at town meeting. That doesn't always happen. But again, we didn't know where we were at. So that was the whole genesis of this. Kathy, do you want to add anything to that?
I do. So it'd be nice if we could, before you actually sign it, even if you have to postpone that signing a few days, to have at least the budget piece of it done, so that what's printed doesn't need amending by either group, as long if we can come to an agreement. So to me, that should be the goal. We're not going to be able to vote on all of the non-money warrant articles before April 5th. We already know that. There's still things changing. That's okay. We're going to have the screen at town meeting that's going to show the votes, so people will see the ultimate votes. So I'm not worried about that, but I would like the printed warrant that contains the budget to be the one that so I think we should try to see if we can't get the budget numbers all set before you actually sign the warrant.
Yeah, and I should have added that, Andrew, that I was referring to the budget piece, not so much the articles, non-budgetary articles. Okay. Okay. So, Kathy, when are you guys meeting? Do you know the date that you're meeting with planning board? Just again, I think and Vanessa,
there was a reason I was asking for Don. So if I can get hold of Don, I'm hoping it's going to be the 7th. But we could try to add them to the 30th. So, we're meeting every Wednesday. We just lost a week last week. So we can try to speed it up so that anything that's budget related, we deal with on Thursday, but we're still not going to vote, Lisa, until the 7th. So I was going to do my usual begging to Mark to give us a couple of days to get the votes done. But as long as we know we're there, before you sign it. We may just need to try to wrap it up on the 30th as far as anything that's truly budget related, if we possibly can.
So Vanessa, I think the plan is at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, the plan is to send it to the printer on the 7th. Is that the drop dead date?
I don't think it is a drop dead date.
Okay.
We only need a couple of days to turn around the printing of the warrant, with our printer. So,
Okay.
don't want to speak for Mark, but I think within a couple of days, we should be fine.
Kathy, I'll follow up with him in the morning, and because he's back tomorrow. So I'll follow up with him and see if the 7th creates an issue or it doesn't. And we'll let you know tomorrow.
Okay.
Follow up 7th, Kathy. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that takes us down to next economic development. Chelsea, was that you as well?
That was. So this one is slightly different than planning, although same concept. So they've had $10,000 in contracted services over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's where their minute taker is paid out of. And they also kept the 10,000. So same principle. A board that we appoint. Historical, on the other hand, took theirs out already, which I appreciate that I didn't have to hold it. So same argument.
I agree.
What do you expect these that no longer have paid minute takers to do for minutes? What's the expectation?
Well, I think it's, Kathy, the same as the majority of the other boards do. I mean, minute takers, it's not fun to take minutes, but I took minutes for 11 years. Sam's taken quite a few minutes in his time too. I mean, ultimately, I think it'd be great if everybody could have a minute taker. It's just when we tried to do an analysis of the cost, it was between $50,000 and $60,000, which is a tough ask of the taxpayers. And, there's a lot of committees that do it. We all sat on Capitol. I'll use them as an example. They shift off, and the minutes are great.
All right, so in other words, you want the committees to do it themselves within their constituency. Okay, so that makes
Kathy, I'll just add, only because if we can't do it for everyone, I get asked all the time, why can't I have a minute taker? So-and-so has a minute taker. So that was the point of the policy. It was about equity all around, equity on the pay for the minute takers and equity on who really should have minute takers. So, and again, it was just a policy decision from the board that permitting boards, executive board, finance board, it was important that, not that anyone doesn't deserve it. It's just a matter of how would we fund it for everybody? And it's a big ask, especially this year.
Totally
Go
fine.
ahead, Sam.
So yeah, I point out that was not a unanimous decision. I am a firm believer that we ought to expand the list of committees that we pay for minutes for, because I think it's important to motivate people to sign up for some of these committees. And I'm certainly not in favor of spending 50 grand for everybody, but I guess I have no qualms of saying these committees get it, these don't. It's sort of like, day to day, either on my day job or my family, you got to make decisions about what you think is reasonable, and you move on, so you don't wind up getting dragged into lots of arguments about the stuff. Just decide. So anyway, one person's view, and I think it was a 4-1 vote on that. So
Thank you for the reminder, Sam.
I would add to what Sam said. Sam was the consummate minute taker and advisory for many years. How he did what he did and paid attention and could persuade, I don't know. I can't do both. But as you decide what to do about Zoom going forward, and I know that's under debate, keep in mind that having those Zoom meetings to go back and look at, either on YouTube, whatever, really helps a minute taker to be able to review it, so you can still pay attention to your meeting and then go back. It takes more time doing it that way, but you certainly can make sure it's more accurate. So keep that in mind as you decide to what we're going to do going forward as far as in-person, remote meetings, etc.
Okay, great, Kathy. Thank you. So, Chelsea, can we, do you want to send a note out? Do you want to we can even have Mark do this. Just send notes out to these boards and committees where there's questions, and just ask EDC where they plan to reallocate as well. Okay, Kathy, did you want, go ahead, Marty, and then I'll go to Kathy.
Yeah, the one thing, and I think it would make sense to loop Jay Tallerman in on this, to have him, particularly for the boards and committees that we're not going to be recommending funding for note takers. I mean, I think it's great, but our minutes are incredibly detailed, and you can comply with the law with a much more stringent approach to minutes for meetings. And Kathy's right. That's particularly the case, I think, in whether it's a straight Zoom situation or if we're going to, actually be able to pull off this hybrid meeting. But I think having, Jay, in the context of open meeting law generally, explain that don't use the select board's meeting minute model as a model for what you do, because they really don't have to be that detailed.
That's happening to everybody, Marty. I remember Capital one time had like a 10-page set of minutes. It was great, but it was quoting verbatim what everybody was saying. So, I know I've tried to mention, we don't need that. You just need to summarize things and what the motions were, et cetera. So I think probably a re-education of how to take minutes would be helpful too at some point.
Yeah.
So Jay's having an open meeting law training. So I think that would be the great and the right venue to be able to share that with Marty. And I'll make sure that he gets a note about that as well.
And Lisa or
Yes.
Vanessa, I think it would be interesting to know from Jay or from MMA or someplace, do any towns outsource with the recordings, we do at work sometimes where we have transcription services, et cetera, to a third party. I mean, that might be something worth looking at, the meetings are all recorded. Somebody in India or somebody, elsewhere in the world, it's a little bit cheaper, can sit there and minute them up. I'm just curious if any other towns have tried that.
It's rare across the state, but it does happen that way.
To Andrew's point, in fact, the YouTube versions include a transcript. I mean, they do the closed captions thing on YouTube. Actually, is something you can copy and dump into a Word document. And it's not perfect, but it gives you essentially word by word record. I've done that a few times as a starting point for meetings, and it's a lot easier to take that and then whack out stuff that you don't want to include there. So there are ways to do that more effectively offline. But again, ultimately, I think that points that have been made are good ones, and that we could actually do with a lot less detail than we currently do for many committees, and particularly with the recorded versions as backup if a question arises. I think that would provide more than enough access to what actually happened at various meetings and comply with open meeting law.
Okay. Vanessa, can we just I see Mr. Haggerty's in the audience. Why don't we kind of get his thoughts on the transcripts and whatnot as well? Utilize.
Tim Martell is there now too. So I don't know if that means ARPA meeting's over with. Tim, can you raise your hand if you want to come over? He does.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Haggerty.
Although this may be counterintuitive, and I may see Mr. Healy with that dour face again, the Attorney General's office has told me that a transcript of a meeting is not a substitute for minutes. It makes no sense whatsoever to me, but unfortunately, that's where we stand. Okay.
No dour, Jim. None. Zero.
Sorry, Jim, I don't know if you also heard that, a little bit of the discussion on the minutes, and I know that you're coordinating with Jay for the open meeting law training. So we'll just give you the same message to him, maybe just to give people an idea of, summary versus not cliff notes, but, more detailed minutes.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you. Much appreciated, Jim.
Bye.
All right. Next.
So Lisa, sorry,
go
back
ahead.
to EDC. I believe Mr. Ballantyne had already reached out to EDC to confirm how much of the $10,000 was part of minute takers. I believe the response was that they didn't have minute takers in the contracted services. So I mean, I would be comfortable with reducing it tonight. I mean, the answer that Brian got was not, he already asked the question, I guess, and didn't get the answer back. That it didn't answer the question.
Okay, does Brian, I see you're here. Do you want to add to that?
No,
Anything?
I'll just say, can you hear me?
Barely.
Barely.
I'll just say that the answer is 10,000 is a it's not
You are completely garbled, Brian.
like other people.
Okay, you're a little bit garbled, Brian, sorry. Okay. All right, so Chelsea, what is your suggestion on that then, to just where we can certainly reach out one more time and ask them where they're planning to reallocate?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Okay, Kathy, I don't know, does advisory have any comments to that?
So Eric saying no, Marcy? No,
Okay.
AP?
Yeah, I just pulled up there the Q2 expense report. I mean, I don't see, they haven't spent nearly any of that 10,000. So
Okay.
if they're not going to spend it, we should cut it.
Okay. Tim, I know
Tim?
you came in late. I don't know if you heard any of that discussion. Sorry, Kathy.
No comment. Thank you.
Okay. So we will follow up on that then. I held the ADA. I don't know if, I'm sure advisory is aware that the new committee, Sam, what is it? The SPAC.
SPAC.
All right. I didn't want to say it wrong. Thank you. They're looking to increase their budget. I know we put 50,000 from ARPA for facilities to do some of the ADA work. And the SPAC committee is actually looking for another 50 that they can have just in case something comes up. So I don't know, Kathy, have they had that discussion with you at all?
I thought it was 5 and not 50.
50. They want 50. They want the 5, but they also want 50.
Okay, do they want 5 in their operating budget, is my understanding from
Yes.
Bonnie's emails, and then they want 100 as far as the,
They want 50 of their own to be able to use. So I guess you haven't had this discussion. I got an email from Bonnie. I'll just hold off on this, but Kathy, I'll send you what I've gotten. I'm sure advisory is going to want to discuss it. We haven't discussed it, the Board of Selectmen. I just got a note from her the other day. I didn't know if she had reached out to advisory as well.
she has only on the 5. I haven't seen the second 50.
Okay, yeah, so there is a second 50.
And it's
So-
my understanding that there's no specific use of the 5. They just want 5. They don't have, a line item budget as far as how they would spend the 5, is my understanding.
Yeah. So I will send to you, I'll forward Bonnie's note, and this is going to be a future discussion with our board as well. I mean, this is the first time that everybody's heard it. It just came up the other day. So I know she talked to Mark about it, and Mark said that it was, that it's not in the budget, but they are looking for it. Sam, I know you've participated in some of those meetings. Have they discussed it there as well?
I was not at the last meeting, the last couple
Okay.
of meetings exactly, so I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll send that out. So Kathy, maybe, I don't know how full your agenda is for 3:30. I'll get you that information in either 3:30 or 4:07 if you want to even have them come in, and we'll certainly be mindful of that as well. Or we can invite them in on 4/5.
So please work
I
with
know.
Mark Purple, get those days.
Okay,
And just to be clear, right now in Brian's Excel workbook, there's 2,500 for their budget, their annual budget, and then there's $50,000 for in the warrant article as far as that piece of it to be funded by ARPA. So that's what they're right now as far as
Okay.
what Brian's going to tell you the numbers
I'll-
are.
I'll send you what I have, and I'll coordinate with you offline after this, because the board hasn't even seen it. It's new and recent. So I'm just I'll leave that as a hold for now. Fire department, Kathy, that was you?
Yeah, and let me just clarify something. We've talked about this, and so we're fine with the budget. It's in Andrew, AP, why don't you take this one as far as talking about the accreditation, as far as what we think?
I think if it's coming out of Harvard funds, I think that makes sense. I think especially because it's a once every 5-year, the $10,000 amount doesn't scare me. I think that the amount of work that the chief has done to do different planning and pieces to lead up to this, I think it's warranted to let them push it forward.
So the point we were just trying to make is we actually support the accreditation process. Talk about funding, that's a separate discussion. So, again, fine. I like seeing the Harvard funds being used currently and not stockpiled. So that's not an issue either. But I think that there was some question about from the select board as far as including that to begin with. So I've talked to Chelsea, I've talked to Jason, who's a fireman. So I just want to make it clear that we do support the accreditation process. And then the way it's funded is fine too for this year.
So I think where we fell on that, and again, Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, is we were supportive if it came from ARPA and not the operating budget.
Harvard.
Sorry. Yeah.
ARPA works for me too. But
I know. Jeez. I'm telling you, it's been a long night already, Sam. Okay, so advisory's good with Harvard.
We're good
Okay.
with the fire department budget, and we're good with the Harvard funds being used to do that piece of it.
Okay, perfect. Next was 291 civil defense. Chelsea, that was you?
me. Yeah. So there was a large increase on this one, and the chief and I have talked about this and my concern around having a stipend in addition to salary for the FEMA rep. So this is a non-union stipend, and it's a union employee who does it. So similar to the tree warden that we just talked about earlier. And he's looking to add hourly time in addition to the stipend that is here. And I just don't agree with that process, that setup. I think it's a stipend or it's an hourly rate. And from my understanding, at least through COVID, FEMA has done any supplemental reimbursement for the employee. So I just think it's a large increase for this particular budget. Obviously, it's not a large dollar amount, but I just don't agree with it in principle.
So Chelsea, can you clarify? They're going from 10 to 14 is the proposal. What makes up the 4?
It's the part-time salaries. It's going from 926 to 5.
What does 926 to 5 mean?
$926 to 5,000 in the part-time salary line.
Okay, and then on top of that, there's a stipend, or that's it?
The stipend's already in the budget. The stipend has been in the budget all along, so it's in FY22. So the stipend is paid out, and then the request is for additional time to be paid out of this budget. And I think what he's trying to do is separate the fire department budget from the civil defense budget, because it is a separate function and it could be held by a non-union employee going forward. And I think that's one of my concerns is, so we have a union employee now who's getting a stipend to do it. So what happens if in the future we have a non-union person doing this function, and the rate that we're paying now sets a precedent for an overtime rate at an hourly amount.
what does Chief Achilles say about this?
I mean, he put in the request, so I think he's supportive of it. He's here if we want to bring him over.
I'd be interested in hearing.
Hang
So
on.
you're in conversation
AP,
with him.
did you talk to him about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's just cleaning it up, right? If right now it's getting paid out of his regular budget. I mean, if we get a stipend for DPW, I mean, if people have a water stipend or a pest stipend and they work overtime, they still get paid. I mean, I just think that the idea that a stipend is supposed to pay you for the hours work, you know, we don't enforce that. Like,
But Andrew, I asked for how much overtime he's getting paid out of the fire department now, and he hasn't because it's been paid by FEMA. So if it came out of the fire department to go, if it was a wash, okay, and Chief can probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah.
But that was one of my questions in going through this budget.
is it, Chief, that you did it because you're worried that FEMA is not going to exist this year and that non-reimbursement is going to increase your overtime budget?
So basically before COVID, any additional time that the emergency management coordinator put in for any planning purposes, any meetings, any of the CERT activities, anything to do with emergency management, his role outside of in addition to the stipend, was coming out of the overtime budget of the fire department. I don't think that's right, because we keep on absorbing that amount of time. And if we get reimbursed, and we've done an extremely good job, and the emergency management coordinator has done an extremely good job at trying to get money back. And it has not impacted the budget, and we've got a lot of grants and a lot of planning, a lot of COVID activities were covered by this person. But we know that CARES money, COVID money is not going to be there all the time. So we have to cover it, and some things aren't covered from the CARES Act or other related funding. So we're going to have to own that. And I just think it's appropriate that emergency management gets paid out of emergency management. We may not use it. If it's reimbursable, there may be money back left in there, but we need to be able to cover that amount, at least an appropriate amount of money, so that we can carry out the mission that we have.
But Chief, if I can, sorry.
Is
Go
it
ahead, Kathy.
reimbursable because of COVID currently and
Yes.
was not previously reimbursable? So it's COVID that's causing the reimbursement, not that it's normally reimbursable.
So normally there are some activities and grants we can get money back from either the state or FEMA, but not all of them. Any activity related to COVID that emergency management has done, we've been allowed to get reimbursed for it. It is not always there. So that's why we really haven't spent a lot in the last 2 years, because a lot of the activities we've still absorbed the extra time that position puts in. For example, the town has a continuity of operation plan. That person worked 8 hours today on that plan. That is not reimbursable. That comes out of the fire department budget currently. I think that should not come out of the fire department budget.
So this 14K should cover the gross cost of
Emergency management.
Okay. And then if you get money reimbursed, you get money reimbursed. But this would be if there's no reimbursement.
Correct.
So Chief, let me just make sure that I understand. So prior to COVID, these overtime hours were being covered through your budget.
Correct.
Through the overtime budget. So if we're increasing this budget by 4,000, is it safe to assume that 4,000 is coming out of the overtime budget that you know?
No. The other way to do it is add $5,000 to the fire department budget overtime, so we can cover that amount. I don't think that's where it should be, and I think Chelsea hit it on the head. Our discussion was I'm the emergency management director. Any of my costs and time is covered under my salary. The emergency management, I call it coordinator. We have a different name for it, but it's easier to say emergency management coordinator. Currently, the position resides in the fire department. But I don't think we have a separate budget for it. I don't think the fire department should be covering that amount of money that we can't get reimbursed for. So I think the best place for it is under the emergency management budget. Either way, I think we need the money. I just think it's best allocated. I thought we did a really good job this year on cleaning up our budget and allocating and identifying funds appropriately. I think this is, whether there's a philosophical decision or feeling on stipends and paying people, that I think that's beyond, that's not the budget conversation.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Chelsea, did you have anything else? Then we'll go around to the board, and Kathy, I'll give it to you for advisory.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking for something to tie back to what the increase was actually for, and I haven't been able to attain that. So I'm not comfortable, even if philosophically I was okay with paying a stipend and overtime rate on top of this.
Okay, Mr. Healy.
I don't have any questions, but I also don't know exactly where I stand on this. I'll think about it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Yeah, first, I think Chief makes a good point. I mean, it seems to me that it's worth separating. And I guess I'm still trying to understand, Chelsea, your concern here in that, are you concerned about splitting the two out separately, having the emergency management cost as a separate piece?
No,
Or just
I'm
the
not
total
concerned
amount
about
of
that.
money that's going on here?
I'm not
the-
concerned about it being in its own budget. I think the
Okay.
cost should live with where it is. I just, with the reimbursements happening, I just have nothing to tie back to the $4,000 increase and understanding what happens on shift, what doesn't happen on shift, and what's getting reimbursed and what can more happen on shift so that we're not having to pay overtime. There's other union related stipends that are in the contract that other people in the department have, and I'm sure there's some overtime affiliated with, say, the mechanic when he has to come in to work off shift because he has to. So from a FEMA perspective, if there's an event that requires the coordinator to come in, then I think, and Chief, you can keep me honest here, there's a lot of those times are covered by FEMA because that is the time that there's some weather event or whatever that FEMA determines we need to set up the shelter or whatever.
But if I could, those are very far and few between. A lot of activity goes into grant writing, planning. We've got a lot of money from the state, our Central Region Homeland Security, the hazard mitigation plan. And there are a number of things, because this person is a shift officer and has commitments primarily to the fire department first. He does a lot of work on duty. But I have to tell you that there's a lot of administrative work that cannot be done solely on duty. And I think we've been judicious in how we allocate his time. We may not spend the whole $5,000. It depends on what activities we need to do that aren't reimbursable. So I think it's appropriate to have this money allocated in emergency management to cover potential exposure to costs. But I'll leave it at that.
So I'm
Lisa,
still
can I
trying-
make a suggestion here? Because I'm still confused about what's in this. Chelsea, are you the select board rep liaison to fire?
No.
I am.
Okay, so either Chelsea or Lisa and Andrew Pfaff, AP, get together with Chief on the next week and come back with a joint recommendation as to what should be in this number to do what Chief wants to do, which is separate it out. So it's not in his budget. And so we understand a little bit more what the 14,000 really is. Because I still don't understand what it is with all this discussion.
Yeah, no, I agree, Kathy. I was going to go there. The only problem is we could do it by Zoom next week. I can't meet in person next week. I'm out of town for a family matter. So if, Chelsea and Andrew wanted to meet with the chief, that's fine in my absence, or we could do a Zoom and then I could participate. So we can coordinate it.
Easier for me. So let's
Okay,
just do it.
and we'll coordinate it. That's fine. Everybody agreeable with that?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll coordinate that. Okay. Next leads us to 512 Board of Health. So Kathy, I know that you had sent a memo around. I know the board had quite a bit of discussion on this as well. And where we fell with similar to the youth and family, we know there's going to be positions and we know that regionalization. And Chelsea, maybe you should speak from the Board of Health side, and I really shouldn't be speaking to this. It's up to you.
No, I'm actually not going to participate in this conversation.
Okay. So, well then Chelsea, okay, never mind. I would say, correct me if I don't get this exactly right. The thought process was that to still continue by putting 50,000 out of ARPA, it gave us the opportunity to take the next year and still look at regionalization. But we were looking to at least put one of the two positions within the SAP and fund it through the budget, similar to what we've done in the past with youth and family. I think that's why we ended up where we did. I know in your note that you'd like to see, and I guess I'll let you speak to that. I guess I shouldn't speak for you, but just so you know where we kind of fell. So Kathy, if you want to speak to advisory, where advisory's thought process was.
Okay, so everybody knows, the general background. This started a year ago, right? It is continued. We've tried to take steps to not necessarily make these two positions full-time until we really were convinced they should be full-time. But tonight we had an interesting meeting prior to this meeting, advisory did, where I'm going to break this into two parts because there's actually something that got brought up that I think should be discussed too as part of this. So I'm not talking about funding it yet. I'm going to keep that off the table as far as how it be funded. So advisory, and I want everybody to speak, but I believe that as a whole, we are still not convinced that the structure that we have today is one that should be the permanent structure. We still believe there's a whole lot of COVID impact on the work that's being done by the two ladies who are now full-time. We hear great things about both of their work. This is no criticism of the quality of each of their work, so it has nothing to do with that. We just aren't there as far as thinking that this is where we need to be long-term once we are past the pandemic, which we hope is pretty soon. We also know that the state clearly is encouraging towns to look at regionalization, and they're encouraging them with their pocketbook, right? There's money being thrown many different ways to encourage towns to look at consolidating resources so that if there's something you need but you don't need full-time, you share it. And we just don't think that that has been totally flushed out. I mean, it's a 3-person board, so it's a lot of work. We think some steps have been taken, but that still has not been done to our satisfaction. So we are looking for a way. We believe that we need to have these positions for this next year. That's not what we're saying. We just know that once we make them permanent in the budget, it's really hard to get positions out. And we know that's where the cost of this town is with people and the benefits, et cetera. So we are still advocating that we try to take steps not to permanently put these positions as full-time positions until we really are convinced that's what this town needs going forward. So that's part one. Part two is this, and I want Tim Martell to speak up here. I didn't think Tim was going to be here, so I told him we would do this, but I'll introduce this piece of it. There is, we're a little bit outside our bailiwick here, but I'm still going to mention it. There is some concern from certainly Tim as a member of the ARPA committee that the select board is basically making decisions to use ARPA money without waiting for the full recommendation from the ARPA committee. So Tim specifically was concerned about the second part of what was on the memo, as far as we would like to see ARPA money fund both of the increases, not just one of the two. So I want to give him a chance to speak to that. And I bring this up because years ago, I was on the initial capital committee, and it was at that point, it was a moderator appointed committee, not a select board appointed committee. And I know exactly how he feels. There's been a lot of snickering on that previous committee, and I listened to it, but I know what happened, which is we worked really, really hard, and the board of selectmen at that point, which was none of you, totally ignored our work, and basically just made their own decisions and just did it. And so it just sucked the wind out of that committee, and the committee died. And so that's what caused that committee to die. It wasn't anything else. It was just because we just said, what are we here for? Our advice is not wanted or taken. So let's go do something else more productively. Okay, so with that intro, I'd like Tim to be able to speak. He just got through with an ARPA committee, so maybe he can add to that because I thought, go ahead.
Before you go to Tim, I just want to say that the ARPA committee for our March, I believe it was March 1st meeting, gave a recommendation to lower the tax rate and suggested up to $500,000. So this $50,000 piece was part of that. It's not that we were disregarding the recommendations they made. We tried to find a way that made sense, short of, they made a suggestion on road money, which again, I agree with the sentiment on lowering the tax rate, but I don't think it's fair to say that we're disregarding what they say. The $150,000 that we took out and that we agreed to pay from ARPA was to lower the tax rate. It just wasn't the amount that they specifically suggested. So let me just say that, just leading into Tim.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'd heard it was supposed to go against capital and didn't realize you just kind of moved it around as far as where you want it to go. Okay, Tim, what do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I want to say, Lisa, if that's what it was, and this is a misunderstanding, then I'm happy to leave it as that.
So Tim, again, I don't think there was any disregard for the suggestion you made, and we were all in agreement that lowering the tax rate was important. And, we gave you guys a job in a short window to do what you did. And we just took a look at where you guys ended up, and we looked ahead as well as to some of the capital maybe next year. And we felt where we were at for the numbers that was the most appropriate way for us on your recommendations to use that money. And certainly if ARPA has any concern on that, Tim, I would hope that, you guys would request to come and talk to us about it. The last thing we want is not for you guys to feel the work that you're doing that we've asked you to do is not appreciated and we're disregarding it. I certainly don't want you to feel that way. And I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping, like you said, maybe this is a misunderstanding, and I would love the opportunity to work with ARPA to correct that.
So I don't want to give you an impression that the ARPA committee is unanimously thinking that and empowered me to come to you. That's not what happened. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. Okay. It's important you understand that.
Okay. No, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
No. I just wanted to make sure you understood that. There are members of the ARPA board on the committee who have put a lot of work into what's been done to date. I know that we have going on, I think it was 400 responses to the survey from the public. So you're going to get a lot of information from the committee in a fairly compressed time frame. So it's been a pleasure to work with the board, and we're looking forward to giving you our report soon. Well, soonish.
Okay, so if the ARPA committee has recommended that, and I've heard two different numbers, so either $400,000 or $500,000 of the $3 million be used to offset the fiscal year 23 budget in some form or fashion to lower the impact of the increase in house prices. And therefore, you can take part of that 400 to use against the proposed increase in Board of Health. Advisory supports that. We just want to go further. So I think you guys have agreed to basically offset one of the two increases. And I always forget which one. And I know there's a rationale for it because one's on SAP and one's not. We would like to see the ARPA money, that part of that 400 be used against the entire increase other than the normal COLA piece of it. So that's the substantive difference in the two recommendations, I think, at this point.
Okay, well, Marty, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say, Kathy, and I guess it goes to your part one. And I'm not sure that we actually took a vote on this, but it certainly is my sentiment. I agree with part of what you said about the Board of Health's tasks post COVID are likely to be very different than they were during COVID. Their performance at least bordered on, probably crossed the border into heroic. But my view is that we've dodged a bullet in terms of our Board of Health, and that we have been underfunded and understaffed at the Board of Health, and that we're not keeping positions that should be dispensed with after COVID. We are putting positions in place that should have been there before COVID. That's my view.
And that may be true. We just want to be convinced of it. That's all we're saying. We don't know what the structure is like. We don't have the expertise to do it, but we are spending a lot of money per capita with our Board of Health compared to the rest of the towns and state. We're way up there as far as what we're spending. Northborough, nowhere near. Other towns, nowhere near. So we just want the time to make sure that this really is the structure. So Marty, it may be the right structure. It may be exactly what we need. We're just not convinced of it yet. So we're trying not to lock ourselves into it until we really are convinced that post-COVID, this is what we really need.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, I'll second Mr. Healy's comments. I've actually followed the Board of Health for several years now pretty closely. And I am absolutely convinced that we have been underfunded and underfunctioned, if you will, for some time with the Board of Health. And it seems to me that what we have now, I see as a base level of resources to provide the support that we should have been doing a long time ago. I think that's not at all inconsistent with my being a strong supporter of regionalization, as I think the Board of Health is now doing. They're already doing a number of things very effectively to expand the regional participation. And I think that's going to go on into the foreseeable future. So those in my mind are not at all inconsistent. And I think that's the path to get to a place where we're actually doing the kind of things that we should have been doing. For example, food inspections, I think had been severely under-resourced for quite a while. And we're now actually through, again, regionalization, getting support for that, which I think is a very important function, along with a number of other items on the list. So I think we're going in the right way. I don't object to using ARPA funds to fund some of the FY23 money, but my concept is that that's a path to get to what I think of as the long-term right staffing, which looks a lot like we do now, plus regionalization support.
And that's the question on the table, is how to fund it. I think you've already voted to use ARPA money for 50K. So we're saying do 100K or whatever the number is instead of 50K. So you're already halfway there. So you've voted for half of it. And I understand it's one position versus the two. So we're again not quibbling over keeping these positions for the next year. We're just talking about how to maybe keep it out of the budget until we know for sure this is what it should look like. So that's the quibble.
Yeah, which I actually don't agree with, but I understand the distinction there. Thanks.
Okay, anyone? Oh, Andrew, I'll go to you first, then Kathy will go swing through advisory as well.
Okay.
I don't have any comments right now. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
All right, so let me go to Eric first.
Truthfully, I don't think I have a whole lot to add on top of what Kathy said. I mean, I'm of the similar opinion of advisory as a whole, right? Because I agree with a lot of the comments that I think we need enhanced services. I also agree that there's a potentially changing landscape. I don't think anything's going back to what it used to be. I think regionalization is really interesting. It's something that I do not have a lot of visibility into yet, so I should dig in and do my homework. But I'm of the mindset that, while there's some unknowns in the equation, that if we have the ARPA money, and I would prefer to put that towards it. And again, my perspective here is I prefer not to add full-time employees until we have a very clear roadmap. But again, perhaps that's just me being naive.
Marcy?
I really couldn't say it better than Eric did, and I agree with Mr. Healy and Stivers. It appears to me that really these positions are likely needed. I just think we need more time to kind of make sure that we're on the right path and explore regionalization as well. And, I would support ARPA for both. That would be my recommendation. Thank you.
AP?
Yeah, no, I think Eric and Marcy and everybody, and Kathy said same thing, I think.
Timothy?
So Opera hasn't made any motions other than the tax relief that was sent earlier. There has been some discussion. There is some reluctance on the board to fund ongoing salaries through ARPA as opposed to temporary help. Again, that discussion has not reached its end and no vote has been taken. So I'm not certain what the final recommendation from the committee will be.
And when is the next meeting of ARPA, if I can ask? I know you guys met tonight.
It'll be on Thursday, I believe.
This Thursday. Okay. Thank you. So Kathy, I guess we'll leave this one hanging for now. We'll, we'll leave it as a continued discussion. How's that?
Yep.
Okay. I know, Chelsea, you probably have a lot to say, but do you want to add anything? Or are you still just gonna move on from this?
I didn't post an agenda for Board of Health tonight. And I think the board has not discussed further since we
Okay.
made our presentation to you. So I'm gonna reserve comment.
Fair enough. I just wanted to give you the opportunity if there was. Okay, so we'll leave that one hanging out there for now. Library. Kathy, was that you or was that? Yes. Okay, go ahead, Kathy. Thank you.
So this falls on under the category of really small amount of money, but a principal. So we had a really good meeting with the board of trustees and Ryan when we talked about their budget. The item that everything was fine except for one item. They've got in their budget for fiscal year 23 the cost of providing hotspots that a person can check out and use when they need internet. So we spent a lot of time talking about this with them. They've discussed it since then. We've discussed it again. So long story short, advisory does not believe the library's mission should include providing these hotspots. I've also talked to Matt Probst since then, who did a little test. I think we all know how to create a hotspot on our phone, right? So he was concerned that it's the type of plan that you have that lets you do the hotspots, but he's done a test of a plan that is a basic plan, and he had no trouble creating a hotspot. So we think that you've got the ability to create hotspots. The reason this is in their budget is because they received a grant. During the COVID money days, they were offered a grant for this, so they said yes, right, and took it, and then just kept it in their budget once the grant has run out. And I forget the number in fiscal year 23. It runs out in fiscal year 23, so they've added back into the cost. They did a survey and I think got 200 something responses, and overwhelmingly the responses were in favor of doing this. But when you ask for something for free, people tend to say yes. I'm not sure I put a whole lot of import into that. We just think that the library is not in the business of providing internet service to people who are whatever traveling. This is not going to solve someone's problem who doesn't have internet. That's a whole different issue. And we've got, places where people can go if they really are needing help with that financially. So we just don't think it belongs there. But again, don't think we're going to the mat on this one. It's $2,000. So we just want to make you aware of it, see what you thought. I see we've got Janet Maney is here tonight from the board, and I believe Ryan Donovan's here. I don't know who else is here from. I think that's it as far as library representatives. So you can bring them over, but it's only $2,000. So I don't know we should spend a whole lot of time with it, but we don't think it belongs there.
Kathy, do you know how many people checked them out in the last year that the program's been?
18, I believe, is what they told us that night.
Okay. Okay.
And MTC has not taken a position on this, just to be clear. They discussed it, but they didn't take a position. So this was just Matt talking to me individually, not as a representative or reflecting MTC.
So Kathy, you said it's $2,000. Is that for the full fiscal year? Is the grant in place for a portion of the fiscal year, and this is the balance? Just so I'm clear.
The grant is in place for a portion of the year, so they're picking up whatever it takes to finish out the year. Now, I do know that they also have an issue with a different line item where there's a subscription that's come in more than what they thought. And so I think what they're thinking about doing now is reducing the cost of the hotspots, reducing the number of hotspots that they get, and taking some of that money and putting it toward this line item. So maybe you want to bring them over and just get kind of caught up with what they're thinking at this point.
Sure. All right.
There he is.
There he is. Welcome, Ryan. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
It's nice to see you. If you want to just add on to what Kathy said, or even give us just a little bit more background on how many hotspots you have now, and
Yeah, if I may, I was able, after the initial conversation with advisory, I did talk with our consortium about a way to generate a statistic on the usage of the hotspots. Is sort of in real time, right? So there's some caveats, but if it's okay to share the screen, I can just very quickly show you how many were checked out. So, I can't do it right now.
Hang on, it's coming.
Okay. Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay.
We currently have 5 hotspots. It was part of
Okay.
a statewide program that was distributed through the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. I don't know what the maximum number that you could get were. I think it was 30, and the minimum number was 5. So we got the minimum number. And part of that was, I guess, the forethought that we've gotten feedback in strategic planning, sort of focus groups and surveys previous, that people that they've asked for this because it's available at other libraries. So I knew that this was kind of going to come as a budget request. So I kind of looked to continue it from an operational perspective. I didn't want to have too many, I guess, of the free ones and then reduce the number. I also had no idea on how many would, how the circulation would be, right? So at presently, you can get one of the, it's the same for what I call the more than books items, which are anything that's sort of a non-standard book or DVD. So we do a 3-week checkout with no renewals. Also, based on sort of the advisory discussions, we're talking about reducing the amount of time for these, the checkout item amount. So it would be a week is what we're thinking. And we would probably only purchase, I'm guessing 2 to 3 in the next cycle. So we're talking about 2100 number. It's actually going to be reduced more to like 1100. So that's kind of where we're at with that. They've been checked out 48 times. So this just gives you what I can check as far as the checkout. So that's the 48 right there.
How many of those 48 are Southborough residents?
It doesn't track that specifically. Most of them, I would say, because these items cannot be reserved in advance. They're only available at the desk.
Why would that, I mean, how would that stop somebody in Marlborough or Framingham from coming to the library and checking it out?
It wouldn't stop it, but it's the same way we check out any other item, Tim. People from Marlborough can come to our library and check out a book. And our patrons in Southborough can go to Marlborough and check out a book there.
True, but you're expanding the scope of your services to now cover a utility for a resident of another town paid for by our taxpayers.
We do that
And
presently,
even if-
Tim, because we have resource sharing with other area libraries.
In
Because we're
terms
part
of
of a
books,
regional consortium.
in terms of books, in terms of media, in terms of traditional library scope, but you're now expanding into technology and utilities. And where does it stop? And why is it within your purview?
Well, we have computers in the library too for people to use, so that's a utility there as
We
well.
also provide wireless internet and that predates me. There was wireless service to patrons before.
Yeah, but do you guys
I
check
got there.
But do you guys check them
again,
out?
that's all related to the library itself. You're talking about a hotspot that can be used for any purpose that has nothing to do with the library. It's a general utility. Right? You're not even sitting in the library grounds. It's a different function. And even though the dollar amount is low, you can't deny that this is a utility you're offering to people from other towns.
I would say primarily it's used by residents of Southborough.
I guess my view is having concerns about it being able to be used other than library functions, I guess, is one thing. I disagree with it. But I mean, the idea that folks from Marlborough or Littleton or Hudson are roaming down to Southborough because they can use a hotspot, I just don't see that as a basis for making a policy decision. This is something that's being offered by the Southborough Library, primarily, certainly for Southborough residents, and I am not troubled by that at all.
Yeah, I'm not
If I
either.
may, I would also just say that this was not done in a vacuum, is that this was part of a statewide program where hundreds of libraries are participating in this and circulating these items. This was not something that was brand new. So I think, well, there may be members of advisory who were learning about some of the services that libraries do provide. You know, this is not something that I came up with on my own. And as I stated before, Tim, it was something that was requested by users of the library. So, you know, I feel that part of my role is attempting to give people what they ask for.
And I agree, Ryan. I don't think that because the state's doing it necessarily means it's a great idea, but I think that it's a useful expansion of access for citizens. And to me, having a few of these is not a budget buster, and B, not a major investment on the part of the town. I agree with Matt Prope's comment that you can actually do that through a cell phone. There are some of us, such as myself, who actually don't have a cell phone. And so you need to have access for people to have that as an opportunity, not necessarily that you have 500 of them or whatever. It seems to me this is a very useful expansion of service to our residents. So I'm supportive of it.
All right, Sam. So I'm going to go around to the board. Andrew, I think Kathy, we lost her. I'm not seeing her on my screen. I don't know if she's in the, I don't see her unless she's in Town of Southborough, room 3. Kathy, if that is you, will you raise your hand?
One last thing I'll say too, is that in the survey, we asked people if they had no other access to internet. And it was, I believe the final number was 232 people filled out the survey. 6 of those users said that they couldn't get internet any other way. That may not be compelling, I guess, for everyone, but it is for me. It means that this service helped give internet to people who don't have it, which I think was an important factor in why I pursued the program in the first place.
Okay, Ryan, hold on 2 seconds. Vanessa, will you bring over Town of Southborough, room 3?
That's Kathy's back.
Okay, never mind then. That's fine, Vanessa. Okay, so Andrew and Kathy, I don't know how much of that you missed. Tim had and Eric had asked a few questions about this. So I'm just going around to the board to get their thoughts on it. I know Marty's given his thoughts. Sam has given his. Andrew?
Yeah, I've been following the discussion. I understand where Ryan was coming from it. So I'm not inclined to support, cutting the library budget by $2,500 to take this out. All things considered, I think Ryan's made a good point for why he's included it. So that's my position.
Okay, Chelsea.
Thank you. And Ryan, I apologize if you said this. In the survey, did it indicate the people that use it, what they're using it for?
No, it didn't get to that specific factor. I mean, I have had conversations because I have personally checked them out to some of the users. So, I mean, we've had a couple people, it did come up in the advisory meeting that around Christmas, some people had used them sort of recreationally, right? But there's also a young man who goes to Algonquin who comes in with his mother. They're one of the users that I think doesn't have access to internet at home. So I know he uses it to do homework. So I wish that was the example I had used that night, but I had not met that son and his mother at that point. So we could ask additional survey questions. I didn't want to get into too much detail.
Yeah.
What I can say is because it came from ARPA funding, it is filtered internet. So people can't really go to sites that are, a lot of gambling sites and maybe, sites that have inappropriate content. Let me put it like that.
Okay. And did you say you're reducing the request to $1,100 from 23 to 25?
Yeah, so we also don't, I've talked with Mr. Montijo about this, and he's going to sort of assist me at looking at because we use T-Mobile right now, because that's what the state did. So it is a benefit in that when Verizon went down a couple times, we actually were able to have internet in the library when the town lost internet briefly at different periods, because we can connect laptops that the library has with the hotspot, and then we can still circulate items. So, but we're looking at Verizon because the town has a contract. There's also a program through a company called TechSoup, which was the initial vendor we were looking at. So they're very inexpensive because they give discounts to municipalities.
Okay. I guess I'm not swayed very strongly either way on this one. So I think I'm okay with leaving it in, although I'm not exactly sure how I feel about the library checking them out, but I think I'm okay.
Is that a reluctant yes?
I guess you
So,
could say that.
I have, Ryan, I would like to sit down and get a better idea of the program before I would ask the board. It seems like if the board's ready to move on with this, but I'd like to hold on this and just get some more information from Ryan on the program itself. Go ahead, Marty, but I can be outvoted.
Yeah, I agree with you, but you know, is it worth a short discussion about getting Mr. Stivers a cell phone?
Good point.
There have been many requests for that I've so far managed to deflect, but.
At least I know now why he doesn't answer my calls, so.
Can we use ARPA funds for that, Marty? Is that something we can do?
It's not personal, Marty.
So Chelsea, I didn't actually, I think, answer your question. The request would be for like $1,100 as kind of, you know, the cap that we would look at this. But I always try to find things as cheaply as possible. And I know we've talked a little bit. I know that you know that I'm kind of committed, to finding a bargain if I can. And I think the other probably most important thing that I didn't say, and then I will stop talking, is Janet Maney's here, and the trustees have discussed this a number of times. And I don't believe at present they're in favor of taking this out of the library's budget. So that should have said that right at the top.
No, I think Ryan, Kathy was clear on that you know, the trustees went. Ryan, can I ask you, so it's being partially funded through this grant, through whatever, when that's over, what is the total cost going to be to the town on the five hotspots? I mean, what portion of over above the $1,100 is being funded by a grant? And if you don't know, that's fine, because I plan on coming and visiting you if you're working tomorrow anyway. So
I am not, but I'm there Saturday, and it is the launch of the library's seed exchange. So this is my good plug for you guys. You can stop by and get free seeds if you want. So, and that's not in our budget. That's thanks to the Friends of the Southborough Library. So the whole program right now with the hotspots, we didn't have to pay for the device itself. The subscription cost is about $35 a month per hotspot, $35. So it ends up being about $2,100 for a year.
okay, so approximately $1,000 is being covered through the grant.
No, it's all being covered. It was paid for with ARPA funds by the MBLC.
Right.
So this is actually sort of ARPA adjacent. It's different. It's ARPA, but it's like it was through a state.
Ryan, going forward, what she's asking is what is going to be the cost of hotspots once there's no grant money at all annually? That's
$1,100. What's in the budget? So it won't be. It's covered under the statewide program now that ends in. It ends at the end of September.
Okay.
Okay, so if you keep it in the next year, it's going to be $1,100. That's what we're expecting going forward.
Yes.
That money's as part of the 587.6 whatever in the current budget, right? So the only question is whether to reduce that by like $1,100, right? Okay.
Okay, so Ryan, I'll have a chat with you. Kathy, we'll just highlight that, like the Board of Health right now is a continuing discussion to some level. Is everybody good with that? Janet, I don't know.
Call Lisa too tomorrow if you want to talk on the phone. I'm just not physically in Southborough tomorrow.
Okay, you know what? I'll touch base with you, Ryan. I'm leaving to go out of town on Saturday, but I can certainly do a Zoom or a phone call next week as well. So, okay. Janet, I don't want you to feel left out. I don't know if you want to just add something quick to this discussion.
I think we've beaten it to death at this point, but
I think so. I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. It was nice seeing you, and thank you for staying through the meeting. Right, Janet, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time tonight, everyone, and thank you for, taking a look at our budget and for asking the hard questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up, recreation. Kathy, I believe. I'm sorry, Chelsea, that was you?
Oh, maybe I didn't.
I think it
thought
was
did.
both of you, actually.
We both do. So Chelsea, why don't you take it?
Perfect.
Okay. And I see Mr. Davis is out there. If we can just bring him over, Vanessa, thank you. So I think this has come up at least every year since I've been on advisory about talking about the rec revolving account. And we talked about it in our select board meeting last week, and Mr. Davis was there, and figuring out if the program coordinator position, hi Tim, can be paid for out of the rec revolving account. And, obviously my personal intention in doing this is not to reduce any FTEs in the rec department. I just want to be very clear about that. And I think rec is an extremely important department for every resident in town to have access to, from little kids to parents to any senior programs. I know they're doing a lot with the library. So I think they're at a point now where they've been very successful. I think, hopefully we have COVID behind us. And I would like to pursue looking at putting the program coordinator into the rec revolving account and flipping the part-time employee who is currently paid out of the rec revolving account into the operating budget. And I'm just going to give you a few figures so that you kind of know where we stand now. If obviously the rec revolving account is set up so that you can take revenue in one year and pay expenses out in another year and not impact operating budgets, right? So Tim can keep me honest here, but summer programs revenue gets collected February, and most often the camp expenses for employees are paid out in July and August, which is the next fiscal year. So the numbers don't always line up, and it's kind of weird with how COVID worked, because we didn't have expenses last year for camp because there was no camp in FY20. And then in FY21, there was revenue, but no expenses. So in FY21, the rec revolving account collected $253,000 and spent $158,000. So that's a big gap because of what I just explained, with there not being camp expenses in that year, but having revenue collected for the next year. So far in FY22, we've collected $132,000, which I don't believe includes February revenue. And then we've spent $321,000. And if you remember, there's the rolling balance year to year. So we started FY22 at $399,000 in the rec revolving account. And if you look at what the current balance is as of today, which includes expenses through 3/25, it includes February revenue, not March revenue, your balance is $452,000. So obviously there's a timing issue with the $452,000 because you've collected any spring wrap, any pre-K programs that have happened in the spring, and camp for the summer, but you haven't paid out those expenses yet. But the point is that there's a cushion in the rec revolving account that could be absorbed, that could help to absorb any timing issues with moving an employee into the rec revolving account. So I'll kind of stop there and just see if there's any feedback, and Tim, feel free to jump in if.
So can we add a little bit more background, Chelsea, as far as why advisory has always focused on this? Remember, one of the primary reasons that there's a revolving fund is the old accounting principle of matching. Because of the fiscal year, having the revolving fund allows you to match the expense with the revenue. The revenue comes in early before the end of the fiscal year, and the expenses are paid out, at least in some part, after the end of the fiscal year. So revolving fund lets you match it. The primary purpose was not to create a fund that grows necessarily. So that's where the concern always was, is this fund seemed to grow, and decisions were being made to spend what was in it that were outside the normal budget process. And that's no offense to the rec commission. The money's been spent on rec stuff, no doubt about it. So we're not quibbling with what it's been spent on. But there's a whole lot of cost in the operating budget that are associated with rec type stuff. We're still paying the debt for the 9/11 field. The fees that come in don't cover that. The DPW takes care of fields as far as maintenance, et cetera. We've got 2 employees in the rec department, which do spend some time on these programs. So the indirect cost of their time is not being allocated over either, like we do with the Water Enterprise Fund. That's a pretty good analogy. So Chelsea and I have talked about this, and we've talked about it recently, and we just felt that it was time to maybe start pulling some of the profit from these programs back over to the town side. Not all of it. Still leave plenty of cushion for other things to happen. This year, there is a plan to buy a new vehicle that is supposed to come out of the revolving fund. So that's on the schedule. We've got that taken care of. But we were looking for a permanent way to do this, and realized that there was a disparity between the 2 salaries that Chelsea has referred to. So the proposal is to basically swap them and therefore have more salaries coming out of the rec revolving fund than there are currently, to basically take some of the burden off the real estate tax levy.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Before we open it up, Tim, do you want to comment before we open it up to the board and advisory?
Yeah. So I think a few things. I mean, we just touched on a whole bunch of stuff in that short time. I mean, I think first overall, if I just maybe open, I think it's, I know this has been a conversation since I started in this town, and I know it's something that we said we wanted to work with you all about it. And I just feel a little ambushed. It's coming at us at the 11th hour before everything's signed off on. But that's just my feeling. I just want to make it known. But I do agree there's a cushion there. I've never doubted that or tried to fight that. But we're at a point now with finishing up everything that was inherited, and now moving forward where we want to spend this money down appropriately on projects, on reinvesting into programs, starting with this van, it being a large purchase that we're able to, handle within the department. So, our intention, or my intention, at least now that, my head's getting above water from digging out from where we were, is to reinvest this money that is building there and putting it back into the community. So, the intention of our department is not to continue to build this fund in exorbitant amounts at all. When it comes to staff, I mean, I understand I don't think it's a fair trade-off to put Denise or whoever our admin is going to be. I mean, that's a part-time salary of less than 20,000, and what we would be undertaking as a full-time salary plus benefits, which I think when we pulled the numbers is close to 70,000. So, you're taking 70,000, you're putting the burden of 70,000 onto the revolving account, kind of unplanned at this point in time, which directly impacts our fees moving forward. And if for some crazy way this was done now, I mean, our fees are set out at least through August, not taking into consideration that we have a gap of this sorts that we need to make up. So I just think timing could be an issue with this. I don't want to have to play catch up continually until we kind of get our footing underneath us to be able to handle something like this. I've always said I'm very open to talking about this as long as we have a plan in place. I'm not going to ever deny that. And I am open to talking about it. I just want to make sure that we're in a good place before we make a knee-jerk reaction and move this in. So that's my take. I know Jen's in the audience if she wanted to add anything. She doesn't need to. I don't mean to call her out, but I guess those are my initial
Well,
takeaways from that.
Tim, if Jen, if you want to come over, you can raise your hand. And we'd be, okay, let's bring her over. So Kathy, I know advisory has discussed this more than the board has. Do you want to start with advisory this time and kind of give us a little feedback on the discussions that you've had and kind of where you reached, where you're at, and the note that you shared with us?
Yeah, but let me just respond to Tim real quickly. So Tim, we think you're doing a great job. We know you have done yeoman's work to clean up some of the things from the past. And but the purpose of a revolving fund is not to accumulate money, it's to match things. So theoretically, at some point, it should say zero in it. And if it were to be lowered, it doesn't mean that whatever the rec commission thinks should be done as far as projects won't still be done, but they just may be funded outside the revolving fund. So I don't think you should assume that you're going to be limited on what you can do going forward just because of this change, if this were to happen. You know, if I had my druthers, you would keep the person who's in there because she spends her full time doing it, and then allocate a piece of both you and both salaries to it because you guys spend time on it. It's the indirect cost method. We've got other departments that generate fees too, and their fees go right into our local revenue, and then we fund their entire department. So it's an anomaly that the revolving fund for rec is set up the way it is and funded. So we're just trying to basically do something we think is more fiscally prudent, but we're certainly not trying to limit or change the things that the rec commission thinks needs to be done to provide the facilities that we need in town. So I just want to make sure you understand that. Okay.
I do. If I can just ask a question, I guess, you know, having this mechanism that's arguably working, at least on our end, I guess what's the advantage of, you know, I guess my fear is take the van, for instance, that we need to purchase. And I don't mean to, you know, I'll make this a long drawn out thing, but, you know, we have the cash in hand, you know, that we've worked to build so that we can purchase, you know, hopefully as soon as the fiscal year flips. That was the point of us raising our spending cap, to meet the need and purchase what we need to be successful. And if that were to go into the pipeline of capital, you know, we would either get it next year or we'd be 5 years down the line in line. So I guess that's some of my concern of if, you know, yeah, I understand your salary piece, Kathy, I really do, especially, you know, whether it be incremental or a piece of mine, piece of Joe's, and, you know, the adjacent benefits for it. I'm just saying with that, with the idea of the mechanism, how it works, I'm worried that if we draw away from it, then we'll be pushed further and further out if there was something we would need and have the ability to do in-house instead of, you know, putting it on the tax roll in future years.
Are you talking about a second vehicle or the one that's on the capital plan for fiscal year 23? That one is on the plan to be bought.
That was as a placeholder with the understanding, from my understanding, with the understanding we were using revolving funds after talking to Jason.
Yeah, so
Jen,
it's
correct me
there,
if I'm
and
wrong.
that is the sort. No, that's absolutely right. It's on there, and the funding is revolving fund, but it's there. It's intended to be on the warrant article unless you guys decide you don't want the van, but it's been approved by capital, and so it's there.
But I guess what I'm saying is if we didn't have the revolving fund and then it got pulled or voted down, then we'd be without a need. And then we'd have to get back on and it would go further and further. Just an example. I don't want to harp on that. Just the flexibility to do what we're looking to do.
But I think, Tim, that's a great example. And my opinion is it should go into the general fund with the rest of capital, with the other, just like every other department. You know, it's not like we're storing, you know, the DPW's fees for, you know, transfer station, and then we're using that to buy them new pickup trucks, or we're not using the police department's, you know, ticketing fees to do the other pieces. I'm a firm believer that there shouldn't be capital projects paid out of any revolving funds, whether that's a van or paving, et cetera. What goes in there should be variable. If you guys do no programs and no camps, there's no expenses, there's no revenue. But a van is a fixed cost. And I understand you're using it for the program, but I think it should exist and be paid for outside of a revolving account. Again, I agree with you. Like, we could have this conversation in the summertime. It's a little bit late in the season for you. But that's just philosophically, how I agree.
Marcy?
Yes, I agree with what Andrew just said. It does seem to make sense to use some of the funds to support at least one of the positions. And, I do understand, Tim, that maybe the timing is a bit kind of last minute, it appears. So I could be convinced on the timing, but I do think that this would be an appropriate use of the revolving fund.
Eric?
Yeah, pretty similar. I'm gonna just start off by saying I absolutely don't want to try to come across and cause idiots or attack what you guys are doing. I mean, it's amazing work, and I'd like to see more of it, right, from the department as a whole. So I do think, the timing is probably not ideal, but where the town is in a tough financial year, we're asking everyone to make cuts, and we were just, disagreeing over $2,100 for hotspots. This is a bigger opportunity to make an impact, especially if you look at it percentage wise in the overall budget. I do hear your concerns, but I guess my counter argument would be, and again, I don't have all the figures that Chelsea walked us through. Like, I don't have the full backup to that, but just taking notes as she saw it. If we're shifting essentially or pulling an additionally $50,000, we think, from that revolving fund, it looks like there's still a pretty big chunk of money there, which you can work to dwindle down over the coming years, without sort of putting you guys in jeopardy of not being able to do some of the things. I guess the last piece I'll say is that if you have particular projects, expenses, or things coming down the line that you in your mind have started to earmark for or want to use as part of that spend down, then certainly that's information that we'd all love to see and share, and that I think community input is important on. So again, you guys are doing amazing work. I agree with Andrew's comments in terms of I'm aligned with him principally in terms of how revolving funds should be used and where revenue should be accounted for in the town. But yeah.
Mr. Martell?
I fall in line with what's been said by other members of the advisory committee. I have nothing new to add. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. I see Jen, you have your hand up before I go to the Board of Selectmen. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add, I know this came up a couple of years ago. We tried to model it out, and at the time we weren't able to do this. But I also know it came up again last June, Kathy, with advisory. And we reached out and we asked to have a conversation. And I know you guys were like breaking for the summer, so we were delayed. But I mean, I just want to say that the Recreation Commission and Tim, we've put an effort into trying to have this conversation proactively and figure out, like, what does this look like? What does it mean? What does it mean for the fund, and even for like going forward? And I just feel like every time we've tried to have the conversation, we've been told later. So for this to come up literally in the last minute and say, hey, we think you should go do this, it definitely feels like we're not being partners on this. So I just wanted to kind of express the general frustration that, like, we're open to this, like Tim says. And like, I'd love to be at a place where we feel comfortable that we could do this. But I want to be able to sit down with Brian and Carla and model this out again and say, hey, where are we really at? And do we think we could actually cover this? Because when Tim and I do some back of the envelope math, we actually think this would put us in the hole this year. So I think what's misleading about our funding is that, like, the goal of the programs is not to make money. Like, we make a very slim margin off these. And the goal is the mismatch in revolving is that the spending cap is that high because that's how high our expenses are, right? So the money comes in and the money goes back out. And right now, like, without a full analysis, but back in the envelope math, we're actually pretty sure this will put us in the hole. So what happens in like 9 months if we're in the hole? We can't pay our vendors. Like, so I'm just worried that we'd make a rash decision here or now or on this town meeting that we're not ready to actually fully support. So I guess my request would be like, let's have these conversations, like, even if it means starting them now for next year, but I really want to do the legwork to make sure that we're making the right decision. And like calling out things like for the fees for our fields, all of our rental fees go back to the general fund. None of that comes to rec or revolving. So all of those fees are not anything that we're playing with. What's in the revolving fund is literally what people are paying for programs to like participate. Just to be clear on like what's actually in there. And I think the other thing we really need to think through is like, what if we have like another like triple E, or we have another event or another COVID, or what happens if we go into a year where programming isn't as popular and we can't afford to pay our program coordinator? So are we just dead in the water? We have to let him go because we can't afford to pay him. So just kind of like understanding like the longer term impact of this, and would almost rather have the conversation of if we can model this out and there is room and we could contribute, is there a different method where we could look at it and say, okay, revolving can contribute X amount and we move it out of revolving to pay it, versus saying, we're going to take the salary, put it in revolving. And if revolving doesn't have the funds, what happens? So
I'm willing to have a longer term discussion, Jen, and I'm sorry you feel that we have neglected you. I feel like we've talked about this every year in some form or fashion, but we don't have to have a revolving fund, which doesn't mean you wouldn't do exactly what you're doing now. It would just run through your department. So again, the revolving fund's purpose is to allow a better match of the timing of when things are received and paid. Simple as that. So I'm happy to delay, and I'm one person, if you want to have a more robust discussion. What you said a minute ago, as far as you think you go negative, that definitely gives me pause, and probably Chelsea also. We didn't think that was the case by any stretch of the imagination. So we definitely would like to look, probably should look at the numbers closer. But no one's leaving you dead in the water as far as paying bills. The town is liable for these bills, period. So it's not like you're a separate entity and you've got to take care of yourself. And if you don't, then there's no help. So that's not the issue. It's just whether the funds that are in there are more than is needed to basically pay the bills associated with your programs. I think it's as simple as that. So I don't think we should make more of this than it is. And if select board and the rest of advisory would like to postpone this decision, we're going to have a special town meeting in the fall, I believe. It could be postponed. We're just trying really hard to keep the year-over-year tax increase down, which is what this helps do, because of the impact of the increase in house prices due to COVID. So that's the background of this. It's nothing insidious. We're not trying to do anything to hurt you at all. In fact, just the opposite. We certainly support you. So if the group wants to postpone this to discuss later and more fully, fine with me.
And Jen, I would agree with you. I think doing it like we would do with the ambulance fund or water benefits, it's a revenue transfer. So the budget would sit in, but I think I agree with you. Just doing a revenue transfer would make it cleaner. For whatever reason, if COVID hit, you had no revenue, right? We would still be in the overall budget, just our revenue budget would go out.
Okay, so I guess the question to the board then is, based on the conversations we've had, and Chelsea, I'll start with you, is postponing it and having these conversations with recreation a path that you would support? I know, you, for one member of the board, had concerns about this.
Yeah, and so Jen, I know you weren't in our meeting last week, but I expressed this to Tim, and it kind of actually ties into what Tim Martell said earlier related to our taxpayer dollars going towards other town residents. My concern is that we open up registration for Southborough residents and anyone else on the same day, and our residents are not getting in. And there's wait lists, at least on the pre-K side. I think there's wait lists for like all your programs, which is great, but it's not good either, right? And I mean, just one particular example, I went to sign up the day it opened. I got one kid into to one program, and I have one waitlisted for the same program, and there's non-Southborough residents in the program. And I think if our taxpayer dollars are going to go to pay for the program coordinator, then we need to prioritize Southborough residents. And I'm totally fine with us opening it up later. And I'm not even talking about, I mean, you could increase the cost, like whatever, but I just really think that we need to prioritize the people who are paying for these programs. And that's really one of my big hangups and why I want to do it now, because
I think that's fair. I think it's fair. to be honest, we've never been selling out like this, right? So it's a new good problem to have, but it's definitely on our radar to bring back to the commission to say, okay, what do we want to do about this? And how do we kind of like safeguard our residents in the future? So definitely, yeah, that's on our radar.
Okay.
To me,
So
that's a different issue that should be discussed. And Jen, we've always wanted you to make them more profitable to the extent you can. So, we're all for Rec Commission really studying this and, picking the programs that are most profitable and expanding them, whatever. But we don't have any more time between now and town meeting to go further with this beyond tonight. So if we're not going to decide tonight, I think we're going to have to postpone this to after town meeting because we just don't have the bandwidth to really get into this anymore, I don't think, until after town meeting.
Yeah,
So
I
can
agree.
just say one thing?
Okay.
Sorry, can I just say one thing about that? So I guess we entered this fiscal year with $400,000 in the revolving account. And I understand that camp is paid out of that balance that comes over. So I'm just really confused as to why we think we're going to go in the red.
What I think, and Jen, I apologize if I wasn't clear when we talked about it earlier. It was going off the fact of the hypothetical. If we were to compare this past fiscal year and take what we made, again, siloed this fiscal year and have to now offset that employee, we would be in the red. When we look at this past summer camp, we didn't make any money. We actually took a loss. And the only reason we cut even was because of the relief funds. And then with RAPs being what they were with coming out of COVID and our general buildup, if I pulled the numbers, if we were to take Joe's position now and we were to throw it in and say all we had was FY23 funds in there, or 22 funds in there, excuse me, we would be in the red $30,000 to $40,000. That's what I meant by that. I understand there's a cushion there, but I'm saying it was to illustrate when we were talking that our fees were not set to absorb or to take on. And I know it was a very strange year, and that's not lost on us, but the pricing structure was the concern, that we did not price it accordingly as it sits now relative to absorb that. So again, that's another piece of this whole thing that we need to figure out on the commission side, and sitting down and crunching the numbers and seeing, because there will be an increase. I think there has to be, just how much that's going to be and what that's going to look like. So when it came to the red piece, that I was talking to Jen specifically FY22 to clarify.
All right. So
Chelsea, are you okay to postpone it to the summer as far as making, really flushing this out and trying to come to a really good decision as far as going forward?
So I think, there's $450,000 sitting in the rec revolving account. And I understand that there's still there's revenue in there, that the expenses haven't been paid out. But I think in my mind that the rec commission has up until through August or whenever they set their rates for the fall to adapt to that. So, I understand what they're saying. But that's a lot of money to be sitting. And I don't, I get Tim's in 1 year. Yes, you would go in the red, but you have $450,000 sitting there. So that's a tough sell for me
too. Just to illustrate it, camp alone is we're 200,000's gone just for 7 weeks. So it's an inflated number, and I get that just because of the success we had this past month. But like you said, it's going to be spent down tremendously. And then if we're going to do a van, as we were hoping, there's 60 to 75 as well that we're spending down. So that number is going to go down. Yes, again, there will be a cushion. It's just getting a better, clearer image of exactly what that cushion is going to be and how it could handle taking on a salary and benefit.
Okay.
Tim, if we were to take $50,000 out of the revolving fund for fiscal year 23 and buy the new vehicle, do you believe that on 6/30/23 there's still going to be money in the revolving fund? That's what we're trying to understand.
Oh, I think the challenge is we literally need to sit down and model this out with Brian and Carla, right? To be able to do that. So punting this to a fall town meeting means that Tim and I can start this next week with them, starting to figure out what does this actually look like and looking at the cash flow to see what the cushion actually is and how much could be contributed. But that's why I feel really uncomfortable making a decision tonight when I don't even know exactly what the cushion number is.
All right, so let me go through the rest of the board. Marty?
We shouldn't decide this for this town meeting. We shouldn't use Rex revolving fund to fund positions in the recreation department. If there's a surplus, we should reduce fees, not look for funding in personnel. That's not what the revolving fund is for. I really think there should be a revolving fund. The idea that we're going to make decisions based on these last 2 crazy years and the way revenues have fluctuated seems to me ill-conceived. Let me see. I would move heaven and earth, Tim, and I suspect you guys probably are, to get every Southborough kid who's on a waiting list onto a program. I think that's really, really important. I'm Machiavellian, honestly. If you can't do that, I tell the folks from other towns that we have Southborough people on waiting lists and we have to take them and refund their money. Period. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. I guess I agree with a number of the advisory points that longer term, I think that it's important to have the capital expenditures come out of the capital budget. I don't actually resist having a position funded out of the revolving fund. But I also think that, again, to reinforce Marty and other people's points, that it's important to have Southborough residents have preference to the programs. And I don't mind, and I've stated this previously, I don't mind having a price differential for folks outside of Southborough to help contribute more revenue for folks to have that price 50% higher or whatever the number is for non-Southborough residents. And given the timing here, I'm sensitive to Tim and Jen's points about timing in terms of the analysis and discussion. I'm fine with deferring this, staying with what we had coming into this conversation, making any changes for the FY24 budget. So I'm fine to defer that. That's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, Mr. Dennington.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mr. Pfaff made a good point. This is kind of a summer project to do the analysis and come back and see how it would turn out if you were to start paying some of the salaries out of the revolving fund. By that time, you're going to have the data right on the $400,000 plus balance now. What is it going to be at kind of the low ebb, which I guess would be September or so? And you'll see how much of a cushion is there. But we're always looking for ways to be more efficient. And so I definitely I would like to see the analysis, but it's just too late in the budget process for this fiscal year to make a change like this. I would be worried about running into a deficit. I think at the end of the day, what I expect is that there may be a way that you can do this. You could start using some of the revolving fund to pay for some of the salaries.
Okay, thank you. So Kathy, I don't know if I know advisory felt fairly strong about this. You didn't really do a quick go around. If you want to just do a quick poll to see if advisory wants to continue this discussion or postpone and allow an analysis to take place.
Right, to me, that's a question on the table, right? Is
Yep.
the timing. Okay,
Yep.
so Marcy, would you like to postpone this discussion to the summer? And then if there is a recommended change, do it at the special town meeting in the fall? Or would you rather do it now?
Summer analysis, fall town meeting.
Okay, Eric,
Summer and fall.
AP,
Kathy, before I get into that, can I ask Tim a couple questions?
of course.
Tim, I think, what did you say the cost with the van was? I thought you said 65,
we don't-
70.
65, 70 is what we're seeing right now. We're hoping it's going to come down.
Okay, but we budgeted 50.
I think that was before everything that was happened.
So
Okay.
that needs to get settled.
Right. So I think that, Kathy, that eats up, what we thought we'd have for room, right? That's extra 20,000 there. And so Tim, originally what we were thinking was not quite looking at the salaries, because that's a pretty big, what's that, 80, 90 with benefits. Looking for at least a one-time, at least I was, on the 9/11 debt offset. We're paying 40 out of the 9/11 account, pay the other 40, which is obviously less than the 80 or 90 for salaries, but that was kind of my initial thought there. So not quite as much. I don't know whether that's more tolerable. I again, doing it as a revenue transfer. So if oh, Carla's got her hand up.
Well, and Carla may be saying what I'm going to say. I don't know the legality around that using the revolving account because it's a program-based program, program money in to be used on programming. And 9/11 is not a field that we program. So I think there's.
Yeah, but you could transfer $40,000 to offset a portion of your and the program coordinator's salary in a revenue transfer to the general fund. And then part of the general fund could be used for that if Carla wants to answer. Just like we're doing with debt service, we'd increase our revenue, but the debt service would stay the same.
So if we we talked to the DOR about taking a transfer from rec revolving to offset general fund expenses, and we cannot do that. In fact, in this year, FY23, we're actually paying the 9/11 debt fund out of the 9/11 fund. So there is an issue with subsidizing the general fund with the revolving fund money.
With the 9/11 revolving.
Any revolving fund.
What I'm saying is it's a net. We're not saying we're going to use the 40 for the debt service. We're using 40 to pay for Tim and the program coordinator, which offsets on the other side.
No, we can't make transfers from revolving funds. We have in the past for the 9/11 field. We've taken something from that revolving fund. We were told by DOR that we can no longer do that.
Well, why can we move money out of ambulance fund to the general fund and water, all the different water benefits, cemetery?
It's the type of fund that it is. So ambulance receipt revolving fund, municipal law states that we can transfer from those funds appropriately. Rec is right now classified as a 53.5. And those funds we can't transfer. They're supposed to be a fund where the money runs through for revenues, money runs through for expenses, and
okay, but to be clear, there is an expense of those programs that's not being absorbed by the revolving fund, which is the time that Tim and the second person spend. So all we're doing is proposing to switch that and allocate more of the real cost of those programs over. But the question right now is the timing. So AP, do you want to do it now? Or you want to do it over the summer?
I think if the van's going to cost 20,000 more, then maybe it's summer. But when it was 50 and maybe another 40, I thought do it now.
Okay, so now you're saying, because Tim, it is 65 or 70, because that's got to get straightened out pretty quickly, because the warrant says 50. So AP, if it's 65 or 70, you want to do it in the summer. Okay, Tim?
Which Tim?
Martell.
Oh, sorry. Tim Martell.
I didn't want to speak out of turn. Yes, I'm on board with the idea of doing it in the summer.
Okay, I'd rather still do it now, but it's 1 to 4. So advisory is supporting postponing this discussion until we can have a more thorough discussion. And then if there is a recommendation, we do it at the special town meeting in the fall.
Okay, and I think the majority of the Board of Selectmen is the same. So, okay, fair enough. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Tim. Look forward to hearing more of the discussions that take place going forward. Thank you both for coming. All right, that leaves us one final budget item, Kathy, Algonquin.
You save the best for last. I don't know if you guys heard, we had a really good discussion last night with all schools, Assabet, and then K through 8, and then we left Algonquin to last, but it was a good discussion. I was a liaison to the schools this year for a reason. I'll tell you why in a second. And I'd given Greg basically a heads up as to where advisory's concerns were as far as mostly Algonquin. We really had no issue. I mean, K through 8 is 2.53. The assessment for Assabet is really low because our student percentage is going down, but their actual overall budget's up almost 5. So anyway, so we really focus on Algonquin. So long story short, as we know, the factors that determine our assessment have gone against us for fiscal year 23. So, we knew this was probably going to come, and it did come. But it's not just the percentage of Southborough students, also the wealth factor The difference in the wealth factors in the two towns also went the other way. We are considered more wealthy than we were the previous year than Northborough. So both factors that go into the assessment did not go our way. So the year over year increase is a lot. It's 9%. Now they'll tell you it's 9.93 because they're using the actual assessment. They lowered their budget last year. So the actual budgeted number from last year to what your budget is 9%. So we spent a lot of time seeing if we could do something to lower it, and to no avail is the bottom line. Their budget increase is only 3%, which is actually pretty low for Algonquin. So Northborough is going to be 0.17 and we're going to be 9%. So the only thing that we can think of that might help, it won't help for town meeting. I think we're kind of stuck with the 9% unless somebody really wants to push on that budget, is to hope that the state in the end is going to increase the local aid. And there's some optimism they will, but it won't help us for town meeting. Is Carla still here? So I think that either at the special or that Carla and Brian and Paul can actually take that into account when they actually set the tax rate. But as far as what we tell the town for town meeting, I think we're going to tell them it's 9%. Andrew Pfaff pushed back really hard on why, with the projected decrease in overall enrollment, and it's pretty significant using NASDAQ projections, why the costs don't seem to be coming down in proportion. And I thought that Greg did a pretty good job explaining that. You know, it's not, they're mostly fixed costs. They come down in steps, it's not a slope. So for every student that goes down, you don't reduce the cost because you don't get rid of a teacher per student, right? So it takes a while to be able to legitimately reduce the staff. And of course, the budget's all salaries. So we really worked hard to try to find a way to decrease that year over year. And unfortunately, we think it is what it is. They did take out, and still not quite sure why, the water heater. I think it's because Northborough doesn't want to pay for their share of it. And so they just took it out. So I hope that that's not going to be a problem. So that came out. So that helped a little bit. But, 3% is pretty low as far as a year over year increase. And, the way you allocate it is by, 2 agreements. The state tells you part of it and our regional agreement tells us the other part of it. So they used $600,000 of E&D in this budget. They only have like 1.1. That's what they're projecting as of 7/1/22. So they use more than half of it. And I don't think they're going to go any further with that either. That's pretty low as far as that goes. So there's that as far as the budget goes. So we didn't know if select board wanted to try to push on the budget itself anymore and see if there's not something else that can be done for it. And if you don't, I think we're probably done with the actual assessment. We're going to talk about the article in a second, but don't know where else we can go as far as that one goes.
I agree, Kathy. Why don't we start with Sam this time?
I'm fine with where we are. I'm not interested in going back and pushing more on that budget.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Andrew?
I'm at the same place.
Okay. Chelsea?
I'm good with it too.
Okay. Marty?
Yeah, I'm fine with where we are.
Me too.
Check it off.
Okay. And you said that the second piece, Kathy.
Yeah, so you want to jump in that because this is where we actually may have a difference of opinion. So as Marty knows, advisory spent a lot of times over the year talking about the philosophy of stabilization. So on the warrant is a article to add a regional capital stabilization fund. They already have an operating stabilization fund with their E&D account. We've got a town small stabilization fund. They've got the equivalent. Now they're asking for a separate capital stabilization fund because they are looking at pretty significant capital expenses down the road. Algonquin's 16 years old as far as renovated schools. So they've got some big things on their plate as far as things that they think have to be done the next few years. So we're back to the question of stabilization. I think Marty was on advisory 12 years ago when John Butler wrote his white paper and convinced the town that we should not have a big stabilization fund. This is a whole new advisory committee since then, a whole new select board. So I don't know. But right now, the advisory committee does not support that article. We believe that it's taken away some of our ability to weigh in on what region wants to do with capital. We've got a very robust capital committee that we want to be very much part of that. And then we believe that there is a better matching of the cost if you bond it and basically have the people who are going to benefit from it pay the debt service with their tax payments. So right now, advisory is fairly uniformly non-supportive of the article to do it. This is the third time that I can remember that it's been brought forward to Southport. Northport passed it years ago. I'm not sure if it's back on their warrant this year, not to repass it, but it really is Southport that's kind of held us up. So they were pretty disappointed as far as it goes. They don't want to have to deal with both towns when they've got a capital item, which is what the effect of not doing this would be. So that's kind of the pros and cons of doing that. So we don't know what you think, so we're really more interested in hearing from you guys tonight.
Okay, well, we didn't take a position on it, Kathy. Certainly happy to let everybody give their thoughts. Andrew, we'll start with you.
I'm still kind of sorting out how I feel about this, but I understand what you're saying. I guess that's all I've got for you right now.
Okay, that's fine, Andrew. You don't have to take a position. We're just trying to get an idea.
I mean,
Chelsea?
the 2 weeks ago, right? We had Paul Desmond was here, and he gave his Greg. They laid out the reasons why they thought it would help smooth things out. So.
Can I add one more thing as far as the numbers go? So their proposal is it's a 5% on top of the budget. So the assessment, whatever assessment is, you add 5% to it. Their budget's about $20 million. So that's $1 million a year. Ours is about 40% of that. So we're talking about a $400,000 addition to their annual assessment, which is almost a 1% year-over-year increase in the tax rate. So it's not an insignificant number. It doesn't mean that when they come to us with the proposal for a new athletic field or facility, that it's still not going to be a big number. But that's what we're talking about is, right away, their ability to start, absorbing and collecting this money in this fund. So it's not a insignificant number at all.
Okay, Andrew, are you set? Yeah, okay. Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew.
So I am supportive of this one for two reasons. One, I think some of the items that have been deferred need to be done. And my understanding is that we're actually not funding it this year. This is just to set it up so that it can be funded. But I don't, like eye washing stations was one of them. And all I can picture is like a science class not having the appropriate eye washing station. So I have some concerns that we're not funding things that we should be funding. And then the second reason why I'd be okay with doing it is because they seem very open to working on the town side to make sure that the items are vetted and working with us to make sure that we're comfortable on the town side with how the money is being spent. So those are the two reasons why I'm okay with it.
Thank you. Marty?
I support. I think stabilization funds are a good idea. Kathy, you're wrong about the timing. I believe Mr. Butler waited until, certainly I no longer was chair of advisory. I don't think I was on advisory anymore. I think the town made a big mistake in doing away with its own stabilization fund, and we're paying a price for it these past few years. So I'm in support of this one as well.
Okay, Mr. Stivers, thank you. Marty?
I'm a fan of flexibility and autonomy for independent organizations like the schools. And so I think if they feel it's a useful thing for them, I support this.
Okay, and I do as well. Though I understand, Kathy, the reasons why in the past, this was a little bit of a tough one for me. I think wanting to work with the town a little more autonomously than they have in the past, I think was one of the points for me that helped sell me. So,
and I think we probably just should leave this as is and know that there's
Yeah.
going to be a discussion at town meeting. You know, if John Butler goes, I'm sure he's going to initiate a pretty good, thorough discussion. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with disagreeing.
Yep.
And having different philosophies. So I think that, you know, we may be done with this one for the moment.
For the moment. Okay.
And Kathy, I think just the part that you didn't, the part that sticks out to me that's the biggest. I'm all for stabilization, but I think the town should have a capital stabilization before Algonquin. And I don't, and anything that's deferred, I'd be
Yeah.
all for doing a capital payment for the eye washer stations. Bring it to town meeting. I'll vote for it. I think my concern mainly is the town would be giving up their ability to vote on these capital items. And as much as they say they want to work with capital on vetting them, the town would have no authority to decide how the money is spent.
Right.
And it could be, and it's actually, Kathy, 1.25, because it's off the full $25 million number with the revenue added in. So, you know, and again, the other thing is it can actually go above 5% with approval from Department of Revenue. So the town basically loses control of how the capital is spending, and it goes to the regional school committee, of which Southborough doesn't have a majority voting share. So I just think it's very risky for the town to lose control.
And Andrew, I think those were some of the points in the past why it failed at town meeting. So,
I mean, I'm all for having a capital stabilization fund and funding everything, you know, whether it's Algonquin or the schools, but I think it should all come to the same place if it's getting paid by the same people.
okay. All right. So Kathy, I think that sums up the budget pieces on what we held. I can tell you the board, there's a bunch of positions we haven't taken yet. Mark's, I got a copy today. He actually worked up the annual spreadsheet that he does just to kind of track. I can tell you that the board took positions of support on, let's see. I don't know if you want to just take a second and go through this and I'll tell you kind of where we stood. Article 1, yes. Article 2, yes. Article 3, yes. Article 4, yes. No position on 5. Article 6, yes. Article 12, general fund, yes. Article 13, free cash, yes. Article 14, yes. 15, yes. 16, yes. 17, yes. 18, yes. 19, yes. 20, yes. 21, yes. 26, yes. And those are the positions we've taken to date. So
You're ahead of us.
okay, so what I'll do is I'll make sure you get a copy of the spreadsheet so you guys know as well. So Kathy, when I follow up with you tomorrow on the drop dead date from Mark as well, you know, I'll make sure that if you don't have a copy of this, that you get it so you can see at all times kind of where we're at. When are you guys planning to take, you said the 7th was when you plan to take your final positions, I guess?
Well, we're definitely going to try to, we want the vote on the budget we want the budget and the warrant to be the budget, right? That we've agreed on, I hope. And so, yeah. And so Lisa, maybe you and I have a chat next day or so as far as timing goes to make sure we can get this worked out with Mark. Okay. So can I just kind of conclude with where I think we stand? So Andrew and I have been working with Brian on the Excel workbook. We all three have, and I confirmed with possibility today that he still agrees that 12% is the best he can do as far as predicting the year-over-year increase in palaces and 0 for everything else. He still says that use 450,000 as far as additional tax revenue from the new growth. You don't want to increase that, although it's probably pretty conservative. And he's got his overlay set at 480. So he's done. He's not going to change those numbers. So based on those assumptions, which are pretty important to getting to a projected year-over-year tax increase, Andrew and I are doing ours a little bit differently, but we're still close. So the first number is a 4. Mine's like 4.3, his is 4.8, Brian's is actually, I think, in between. But it's a shame because the year-over-year increase without the split problem is really low. It's 2. It's really low on the 2. So, you know, I think we've done yeoman's work. Don't know where people got this 20% number that you keep seeing in the blog. So we're heading in the right direction. I still wish it was a 3 in the end as far as that final number, but we may not be able to get there. But we do need to talk about local revenue at some point.
So Kathy, if we take out the number we added a placeholder for reserve for rec revolving and for Board of Health, ARPA, we're over 5.
Okay, but then reduce the reserve fund by 10.
We did that. We're still at 5.07.
Okay.
And Andrew, that's with the 12%.
With the 12% shift, with
That's
no
what I-
shift, we're just under 3.
Got
We'd
it.
already
Okay.
taken the 50 out of the revolving fund when we did our numbers. So
Okay, so we have some homework in front of us regarding some of these budgets, maybe tick that number down just to hear more. So Kathy, you guys are meeting with, just so I know you sent a memo to the board. The 30th, you're planning on meeting with, just so the board is aware, 30th is,
Jim Haggerty,
Yep.
Trails, and then these 3 small departments that we were supposed to meet with on the 16th that we couldn't. So it's rec. So we haven't met with rec. So we're meeting with rec, we're meeting
Okay.
with building, and we are meeting with conservation.
okay, that's on the 30th. Okay,
And then the 7th, we're doing CPC. CPC doesn't have a lot going on this year, so
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about that one.
Yep.
CPC, planning board, personnel, and we're going to deal with the benefits as far as the overall discussion.
Kathy, is there any non-budget articles that we need to, whether that's citizens petitions or any of that kind of stuff that we need to cover?
Well, we're going to have to cover those. Those are probably, those won't be in the printed warrant as far as our votes. So we got to get to those, but it's still, we've got to get to them, and we'll get to those after April 7th. Everybody's going to get to those. We got to talk about them. There's a lot, there's going to be a lot of discussion town meeting with those.
okay.
Oh, one more thing, Lisa. Do
Yes.
you guys want, if you had your druthers, would you want the planning board to move the tree to the special? Is that true? And we just can't convince, because we agree, and there's, with these citizen petition articles coming through, we really would like to see the trees one flushed out better and moved. So I don't understand, and they just don't want to do it.
It's a big difference between a multi-day town meeting. And,
Yeah, I think that could really extend it. So
I think it's a big discussion item, Kathy. I do.
okay, so maybe
They are not ready for prime time.
okay, so I'll give it a try. I'll call someone and see if I can't prevail to see if we
So
can do that one.
before we end tonight, Kathy, did you want Andrew, I don't know if you're ready. Do you want to take just a few minutes and go over your rules and regulations, or would you prefer Kathy can potentially put it on an advisory agenda between now and, the
I can
7th?
try to summarize it in like 5 minutes. If you
Go
like.
ahead.
Also, there's a revised version in the draft warrant that was circulated within the last couple of days.
Today, I
We've got
think.
that one.
Yep. So what prompted it was last summer, the select board spent a lot of time considering an action that the historical commission had taken relative to the demolition delay bylaw. In a hearing, they had sought to enforce a rule against someone, but there had been no public hearing or any public notice to consider this rule and interpretation of the demolition delay bylaw before they sought to enforce that against a property owner. So just coming out of this, I thought, okay, what can we do to prevent a situation like this from occurring? And one would be to have a simple rule which would require a board or committee before is exercising rulemaking authority. And by rulemaking authority, I really meant the most formal of rulemaking authority, not, for example, the type of administrative policies that some boards have, or, like the size of a piece of paper that someone has to file an application on. There should just be notice and opportunity to comment on a rule before it's adopted, because that's how federal government does it. That's how the state government does it. Let's have it at the municipal level, and let's keep it as simple as possible. So I think there's really the boards and committees that would really be affected by this would be select board, planning board, historical commission, a little bit ZBA, Concom. Those are the big ones. Now, I did also circulate it to a lot of other boards for comment as well. And I think some of the reaction was from some is, why are we doing this? This seems like an administrative headache. Okay. So Tim Litt was very helpful. I sat down with him last weekend. We spent a couple hours. He was very helpful in making some suggestions to tailor it. So there's now a capital R regulation term in the bylaw, so that it'll only apply to capital R regulations that are being exercised by an explicit grant of authority under a state statute or the town bylaw. So that is intended to limit it just to the boards that I was talking about and make clear that it's not intended to cover policies or things like that. And again, I didn't, this isn't meant to being, it's not meant to be, aimed or at any one board or anything like that. It's just thinking about, okay, lessons learned. What can we do to make sure things go smoothly in the past, in the future. So, some of the best comments I've gotten are, I'm surprised something like this didn't already exist, but it didn't exist in our town code. Just a simple requirement that before a committee is gonna adopt a rule or regulation, has to do so in a public meeting with some notice, and it would be more than the 48 hours notice that's required under the open meeting law. The original bylaw draft that Jay Tallerman and I had was 14 days notice, and in the new draft we just dropped that to 7 to make it a little bit easier. So that's the substance of it. Hopefully I explained it and captured it pretty well. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me while I'm here.
You did great. We miss you on advisory explaining that kind of stuff to us. So is select board unanimously supportive of the current version of this one?
I don't think we've actually talked about the new version, but it's, again, since the last meeting, took all the different comment from a bunch of boards. And as I said, Tim Litt was really helpful in putting together the new draft.
Kathy, we can give you a quick straw poll, just a thumbs up or down. Marty? Sam? Chelsea?
It fixed my concerns with the original version are fixed here, so I'm supportive.
Okay.
So Board of Health is actually talking about this tomorrow.
Okay.
So we're meeting at noon. So I'm not going to give you my.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one part in there in the new revision which is supposed to help the Board of Health, which is it's like an escape valve. If there's an emergency situation, you could do it on less than 7 days notice.
Is there anyone that you've heard of that is adamantly opposed to this?
The opposition or concern that I heard was from, I actually heard the board of library, the library trustees met about in a meeting and didn't like it because they thought that it might cover things like photocopying policies and things like that really, Ryan should deal with. So hopefully revising it in the way that I did makes clear. I don't think it affects the library at all.
Okay, so we'll talk about it. So that's a really good explanation.
I mean, some of the people that have expressed concerns, I've tried to draft it in a way it just doesn't affect their board. So hopefully I made that clear.
All right, so we may reach out to you again if we have any further questions, but that is definitely a good start. So I'm glad we did this.
Okay.
Lisa, one more comment too. I think that we're going to probably support the noise bylaw unanimously. I think we had a good meeting with them. There's probably still a couple more changes to be made before it's, I guess, done. But so far, I think that, and we did a straw poll on that one, that I think we're going to support that one.
Okay, I know we haven't discussed it. I know they updated that was another one of the things I believe, Vanessa, that got updated in the warrant and the current warrant. So, okay. Well, thank you. Much appreciated. Always great to have us all get together and have a conversation. I think we got a little bit more work to do, a little bit of homework for some of us. But again, on behalf of all of us, thank you to advisory for adding another meeting to your schedule and spending the evening with us. It's always appreciated.
No, we always enjoy it too. Marty, thank you for everything you've done for the past 3 years. So this may be one of the last times we'll see you at town meeting, but
Not going anywhere.
I know, but
I'm gonna be like Tim Litt. I'm gonna have a spot right next to Tim. And
well, Marty, we might have an opening on advisory. So
actually, we're not joking about that, Marty. Just so you know, we're not joking. So
yeah. No, thanks though.
move. One player is one player, but some cash got to be involved here. So
Yeah, death, taxes, and that ain't happening.
A player to be named later will be added into the deal and a third round draft pick.
Future draft pick.
There you go.
No, I think Marty, he had like a 10-year, he was very involved in it, like a 10-year absence. So in, 2040 or 2035, he's going to make a big comeback.
There you go.
Think about
Awesome.
it.
Kathy,
Think
do you
about
need to adjourn your meeting?
I do. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Marcy.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Tim.
Aye.
AP.
Aye.
Cook is aye. I'm getting confused because so many people used to be on advisory. I almost called the wrong people here. Okay, so we are adjourned. Thank you, guys. We'll be talking.
Thank you. And Kathy, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So we're going to do, I think we covered everything else on our agenda already. So we're going to do one last public comment. If there's anybody in the public, Mr. Litch, if we could bring him over. Thank you to everybody for hanging out with us. Mr. Litch, welcome.
Mr. Litt's going to be offended for me associating myself with him. He's going to say, stop doing that.
I charge for the seat next to me. There's a reservation fee. But other than that, you're welcome. So aside from that, I wanted to supply one fact and make one observation, and then you can all go home and be grateful. The fact is, and I don't want to reopen the conversation about hotspots, but one statement was made that isn't quite accurate. I did a lot of research on what was possible with hotspots and cell phones, because a few years ago, I was forced to get a smartphone and give up my favorite flip phone. So it turns out that cell plans by the major carriers do allow you, by and large, to create a hotspot with your cell phone, but no plan from any of the MVNOs. Those are the people, like Mint and that flavor of operator. None of them allow you to create a hotspot with your cell phone. So that's just and I very rarely disagree with Matt, but in this particular case, I've done the research, and the sample size of one is interesting, but it is not dispositive. The observation goes back to your conversation on minutes and minute takers. And some of you know that, I go back to the dark ages, before COVID and before Zoom. And, I think a couple of things. One is that, Zoom has become a convenience, and a crutch for a lot of things. And one of them is this business of taking minutes. But back in the dark ages, or some of us call them the light ages before COVID, people would make audio recordings of meetings and use those to generate minutes. I mean, personnel board did it, advisory did it, many people did it, and that's a perfectly reasonable way to do things. So, I mean, I don't think you need YouTube. And I think, that's sort of a bad straw horse. I personally think that the more people have support for taking minutes, the better. I mean, I have at various times contributed notes that found their way into minutes for unnamed committees. But I just don't think that the argument that, well, now that we're used to it, we can't do it without Zoom is a valid argument. And with that, have a good evening.
Mr. Litt, as always, it's a pleasure. We look forward to hearing from you. Mr. Fling.
How's it going, guys?
Hi, Tim. How are you? Welcome back.
Thanks. I just was going to say, just on that same topic of note takers, I know from being on a committee today, and I know that there's topics coming up for discussion in the future about how the model would work going forward for hybrid and Zoom and whatnot, to continue to encourage that opportunity for YouTube to be a usable platform. It not only helps with the minute taking, which we have figured out with at least the noise bylaw committee how to do efficiently from that, but also to go back and check on other boards and committees. So you can kind of get a chance to go back and see the other committees that you don't actually have time for. So that's my only
Awesome.
comment.
Tim, thank you very much. The board is, we've had those discussions as well, you know, the number of people that are actually watching meetings that didn't have the opportunity before because they weren't taped. So point well taken. And thank you for hanging around to the end.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Mr. Healy, do we have a motion on the table?
We adjourn.
All right, thank you. Roll call. Mr. Healy.
Aye.
Mr. Dennington.
Aye.
Mr. Stivers.
Aye.
Ms. Malinowski.
Aye.
Ms. Brascio, aye. Thank you all. Have a good night. Oh, Marty, sorry. Before.
I was just going to ask one quick question. I know we're adjourned now, but what is I see the 5th and the 26th. Is the 26th the last meeting?
No, because there's a meeting the following week, which is the 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
you still got another one. Still got another one.
You can't leave yet. Don't pack up.
Nope. Nope.
All right. That's it. Good
All right,
night,
everybody. Thank you. Have a good night.